Welcome on in, everybody. Today is the season 4 premiere of Beyond Nile lecture series, and it is my first lecture of season 4. So, welcome to my Twitch talk. I love that. We're taking that. I love it, Alex. We are going to talk about the Harem Conspiracy today. So, spoiler alert, it might be about an assassination. This is How to Assassinate a Pharaoh, a deep dive into the Harem Conspiracy. And this is going to be pretty deep. We're going to read some actual text. We're going to read some translations. And I am going to tell you guys about an event that happened in ancient Egyptian history, which has been dubbed the Harem Conspiracy. This is not the actual ancient term for this event. If you guys remember last year's lecture on crime and punishment in ancient Egypt, which is on my YouTube, if you haven't watched that, it's a really great one. We did talk about the crime of conspiracy or treason against the king. And if you recall, we don't have a lot of information about it or a lot of information about how that, what punishments you would get, minus this particular case. This is pretty much one of the only examples that we have and one of the good examples that we have. It's also really, really important because it gives us a lot of insight into the legal proceedings, and that is sort of in the legal proceedings of like the very, very formal royal court, rather than sort of like a lower court or something that has to not do with the king. So we're going to start off where I'm going to give you guys a little context about what is going on prior to the conspiracy in Egypt and what's going on in the royal court with who's the pharaoh, all of that. I'm going to introduce you to the victim of the crime. It's going to be Ramses III, and then we're going to go over the details of the event. The majority of what we know from this case comes from one papyrus, known as the Judicial Papyrus of Turin. And so I'm going to give some background on that text, to name out some of the main characters in this legal drama, and then read you a translation of the text. And I actually was able to find translations for a few other texts that also talk about the Harem Conspiracy and who may have been involved. And so we are also going to read out those translations as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about the aftermath of the conspiracy and look at two different mummies, one who was very much involved in this plot and one who may have been involved. So let's sit back and let's listen to this court drama. Dun dun! I was going to try to get a sound alert, but I didn't think about it in time. Steph thinks about it. Dun dun. This is the court drama that we're having. We are doing a lecture right now, everybody, on TikTok, so you're more than welcome to listen. I'm not going to be doing as many off tangent, off other things. No ball. Actually, you are genuinely, we just got started. This is the cover of our lecture. So you literally came here just in time. But Hound of Heaven, very briefly, no, there's not a lot of evidence. And Turk, I'm very curious what you talked about because I also had a similar conversation with him and I'm very curious. But let's dive on in. Everybody. So let's go talk about the background of what's going on. This is not my expertise, the Ramesside period. I've told you guys that before. I'm much more an early 18th dynasty person. So this is not my total expertise, but I have done a lot of research on this particular topic lately. So this conspiracy takes place in the 20th dynasty of the New Kingdom, and we actually know the specific year that this conspiracy took place. It was 1155 BCE. But let's take one step back and look at a little bit of the 19th and 20th dynasties. So these are collectively known as the Ramesside period because most of the pharaohs in this period are named Ramses. And this is the second half, essentially, of the New Kingdom period. So this is after Tutankhamun, this is after the Amarna period, after Akhenaten, the Ramessides come into power. So while the 19th dynasty quickly rose in power and dominance in the wider ancient world with the rulers Seti I and Ramses II, the 20th dynasty, unfortunately, is the beginning of the decline from this period and really in ancient Egypt in general. The 19th dynasty, after this period, they really could not rise back to that period. So think Ramses the Great. Ramses the Great is not only like the peak of New Kingdom, but he also is sometimes considered like one of the highest peaks in sort of power in Egypt, throughout the entirety of ancient Egyptian history. So afterwards, they just really never kind of got there. I do not worship the ancient Egyptian gods. I'm an Egyptologist. I have my master's degree in Egyptology. I'm not a Kemeticist, which is a separate thing and very cool, but just not what I do. I'm gonna change one thing very briefly on my TikTok. Actually, no, wait, let me just do one thing. Sorry, guys. I realize I'm gonna hide this, and I'm gonna add another text on my TikTok just saying what we're doing. How do I center this? Oh, wait. Sorry guys, just give me 2 seconds so that this is actually visible. Okay, there we go. Sorry, just double checking. Yes and no. No, sorry, I'm gonna back up. No, because we have, actually, Otto, I don't know if you were here for this. We have a new command on Twitch, timeline. So now I could reference things when I'm talking about it. So if you see the timeline, you'll see the New Kingdom period, and then you'll see after the New Kingdom, you have the Third Intermediate period, then you have the Late period, then you have the Short Macedonian Empire, and then you have the Ptolemaic period. So it's not too close, although if you look at the dates, it's not too far away. It's just not that close. Rocco, I'm not a biblical archaeologist, so I don't answer questions about biblical stuff, and we're giving a lecture today, but welcome on in, Hamza. We are talking about the Harem Conspiracy today. We're giving a little background of what's going on in the 20th dynasty before we get into that. I know, Otto, I forgot. I was like, timeline. I need to remember that we have timeline and that everyone can go double check what time period we're talking about. So again, after Ramses the Great, they really never can rise to sort of the power that they had. So most of what's going on in the 20th dynasty is kind of slowly but surely declining from that. This, I will also say, coincides with the Bronze Age collapse. If you haven't heard of the Bronze Age collapse, this is a much wider period, of societal collapse all over the Mediterranean and the Near East. There are lots of theories about it. I don't have time to go through all of them, but we will go through sort of one of the things, which is the Sea Peoples. And I do have plans to do a full Sea Peoples and the Egyptians lecture because it is not my expertise as well, and people have always asked about this. I am live, but I will save this and it will go up on my YouTube as all of my past lectures have. So we will do that. But yeah, it will come up. It will come up later. I've been getting faster and such about, I'm getting faster at editing them and posting them on YouTube. I do not know what that civilization is. I'm an Egyptologist. That's all all I've studied, unfortunately. So let's talk about what happens at the end of the 19th dynasty, because it's very important to know when you're looking at what happens in the 20th dynasty, because it kind of is a lot of reasons for why there is such a steep decline. I got it at the University of Memphis in Tennessee, which has its Institute for Egyptian Art and Archaeology. So in the 19th dynasty, it ends with the rule of Queen Tuasret. If you haven't heard of her, she's a really cool Egyptian queen. I don't think she gets covered a lot, but this is her. And Egypt essentially enters a civil war after her death, though we don't really know what the cause of it is, because we don't have a lot of historical records from this time period that have been preserved. Eventually, the civil war ends with Pharaoh Set-Nakht on the throne as the first pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, but we don't really know if he has any sort of relation to Tuasret. So for the most part, even though the 19th and 20th dynasties have so many Ramses, they are probably not biologically related. We're not 100% sure, but they're probably not. So we have the death of Tuazeret, we have the beginnings of Set-Nacht, and then we have Ramses III. So Ramses III is the son of Set-Nacht. He's the second ruler of the 20th dynasty. He is the subject of our court case today. This is the victim, as I will tell you guys later. So he ruled for 31 years, which for the time is actually pretty long. It's been probably the most consistent long reign probably since Ramses II. And we know that he has at least 3 wives. He had a wife named Titi, Isis Ta Hemjert, and then another one named Ta. And he had several children, though actually surprisingly only one recorded daughter. We can probably assume he had more, but at least only one has been recorded. Yes, she does. Tuazeret does it. She has a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. It's not the best one, but it's a nice one. And then she does also have a mortuary temple in Thebes that's being excavated. Very true. Yeah, pretty much his favorite daughter. Somebody that gets recorded as somebody who is obviously in favor of him. Granted, it also depends on what structures and what statues and things are preserved, but it's all the possibilities. So the interesting thing about Ramses III is that very similarly to Ramses II, he lives for quite a long time, so much so that a couple of his sons actually die before him. And they have very, very beautiful tombs in the Valley of the Queens, excuse me. And there are 2 that you can actually visit at the moment. And they're beautiful, beautiful tombs. And they feature very interesting imagery of young princes, like they are physically children, wearing all of the royal regalia with their father, which is not the most uncommon, but princes being depicted with their fathers is kind of uncommon. There are a couple exceptions to it, but there's not a lot. Welcome on in, Ahmed. No, I didn't know that, Hamza. That's really cool. Memphis University is opening a new branch in New Cairo. That's very nice. I like that. Yeah, I guess that's really what it is that for the most part, princes are never really depicted with their fathers, except kind of during the Ramesside period. Especially princes that don't rule. It's sort of weird. It's like crown princes sort of wasn't. Yes, so unification of Egypt, like at the very beginning, was pre-dynastic period, so that's way long away. But Egypt was pretty much unified in both Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. And it was mainly separated in Third Intermediate and Second Intermediate. I think it may have been separated in First Intermediate too, but I can't remember. Well, come on in. I'm so glad. We do these lectures once a month. I do a lecture about an ancient Egyptian topic, and then I get a guest as well. So we'll have a guest in 2 weeks, but all of my old lectures are over on my YouTube page, MelissainDeNile as well. Yeah, first at the end. Yeah, that first I'm not as always familiar with, unfortunately. So the unification really always tends to be in those high points. Again, those kingdoms and the intermediate periods tend to be when they are not unified, and then the late period is kind of back and forth. Late period's got a lot of stuff going on that's very different. But yes, and this is again like coming off of the 19th dynasty when it was really powerful, and they actually had an empire. They started to expand and started to take over other areas of the Near East. So yeah, so we are going to talk just a tiny bit about the late Bronze Age collapse. Don't ask me any specific questions about this because I don't know much. But the late Bronze Age collapse does mainly coincide with Ramses III's reign. So like it is happening obviously in other parts of the Near East and other parts of the Mediterranean, but it really is like during his reign and is not a direct reason, but it definitely is one of the reasons potentially why he was assassinated. Eric, when I say kingdom, that is a time period, not what the word is typically used for, in that it's a area. So the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom are time periods that are all separated. But they use the word kingdom as a label for when it was a high period versus the intermediate periods, which are happening in between them. So yeah, there is only one kingdom in Egypt technically, although then there's the Kushites in the south as well. There are other kingdoms, other civilizations around them, but when I say Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom, I mean they're all Egyptian, if that makes sense. That is a little confusing. I never thought about it that way, actually, just because I've learned it. I've talked about it so much that I never realized that is technically not what the word kingdom is typically used for. I have a very, very, very little, not a lot, unfortunately, because mostly that is outside of the purview of what ancient Egypt is considered. King and pharaoh are both coincidentally used. So the technical term for a king is nisu, is the word for king. But pharaoh comes, we talked about this the other day. Pharaoh comes from per-aa, which means the great house, and is typically like a word for palace. But in the like New Kingdom into the late period, they started calling the king the great house. They just like started calling him the per-aa, and the pharaoh is derived from that and stuff. So old is just, it's old. So Old Kingdom is pyramid time, Middle Kingdom is middle time, and New Kingdom is new time. I don't know why they gave them those labels, but it's just a timeline. So old is in the old part, middle is in the middle of the entire reign of it. Yes, so they didn't call it pharaoh, they called it per-aa, but yes, then pharaoh I think is probably Greek that derives from that. The Romans. Technically the Romans, they took it down. All right, so the Bronze Age collapse coincides with Ramses III's reign, and it mainly is in the form of an invasion of the Sea Peoples. No, Ptolemaic part is separate. Baha, I don't know if you were here when we announced this, but I made this timeline. If you do, nope, I did it wrong. If you do exclamation point timeline, you can get a full timeline of the ancient Egyptian history. Sorry, that is not on TikTok, because I don't think I can do commands on TikTok, sadly. So again, we're gonna do a lecture all about the Sea Peoples, don't worry. But in a teaser, this is some of the stuff that happens specifically during this reign. So the Sea Peoples are causing considerable damage to Egypt and other nations like the Hittites, who actually never really could rise again because of what the Sea Peoples did to them. And we have a text about the Sea Peoples that comes from the second pylon of the Temple of Ramses III at Medinet Habu, which is in Luxor/Thebes. And it says, quote, "All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could resist their arms from Hatti, which is Hittites, Kode, Carchemish, Arzawa, Alisha on, being cut off at one time. A camp was set up in Ammeru. They desolated its peoples, and its lands was like that which had never existed. They were coming forward towards Egypt while the flame was preparing for them." So that's a quote from Medinet Habu. No, we do not know what the Sea Peoples called themselves. I know that much, that the Sea Peoples is absolutely a modern name, if not maybe from Egyptian. That actually might be Egyptian. This is an image of Medinet Habu. This is Ramses III over here, just trying to destroy all of the Sea Peoples that you see on the boats here. Not at this moment, user, because I have not prepared a lecture on the Sea Peoples. This is a small section of this larger lecture about the Harem Conspiracy. So I do not know what the current theories are of who the Sea Peoples are. Egypt was successful in repelling the Sea Peoples in 2 battles during year 8 of Ramses III's reign, but it was at a very heavy cost for these battles, and it considerably weakened the pharaoh. We know that the first recorded labor strike is recorded in history. We know that the first recorded labor strike that has been recorded in any history is in the 29th year of his reign. Remember, he had 31 years of his reign. And we also know that there was some sort of natural disaster event that occurred in and around of Egypt between 1160 and 1140 BCE, and this prevented sunlight from reaching the ground and thus stunted global crop growth. Scholars think that this might be a volcanic eruption called Hekla 3. So all of this stuff is sort of compiling and just like kind of laying on Ramses III during his reign, and may have consistently weakened him and weakened the power that he held considerably. sorry, I'm trying to answer questions, but we're also trying. So user, this whole lecture is about the Harem Conspiracy. This is what we're talking about today. I'm giving background of the 19th and 20th dynasties to get to the Harem Conspiracy. We do not know where I have to do research on the Sea Peoples to answer all of these questions. But I do not know anything beyond what I just said about the Sea Peoples. I'm more of an 18th dynasty, so like a little bit earlier. Akhenaten is one of my favorites for sure. Okay, did I get to the thing? Oh, okay. And so I know how, if you guys remember, I've talked about this a lot, where almost all of the major declines in ancient Egyptian history can be attributed specifically to the rise of the priesthood over the pharaoh. The priests are essentially getting more powerful, they're getting more items into their treasury, and they can essentially sometimes take over the pharaoh. And they also are owning considerable lands, and people are donating things to their treasury, and so they can essentially buy interest and buy favor away from the pharaoh. We know that this happened at the end of the 20th dynasty, after Ramses III has already died. But with the strike, this famine, the Sea Peoples, and even more, it is not a surprise that there's some sort of conspiracy that brews up to take Ramses III off of the throne. So let's talk about the actual conspiracy. And I know, I hate AI. This photo was way too funny. I did not create it, I just found it on the internet, and this photo was genuinely way too funny only because of this weird man in the back who just has white eyeballs. So there's not, unfortunately, a lot of good imagery about the conspiracy. I need some artists to do some artist renderings because there's not a lot. But let's talk about the actual conspiracy and what happens. I know he's like all this like white hair and he's fully buff and the sword's looking a little wonky. Yeah, there are some really bad AI photos of the Harem Conspiracy, and I only picked this one because it's just genuinely funny. So let's go. Let's talk about this conspiracy. So mainly this conspiracy is called the Harem Conspiracy because it was a coup d'etat plot to kill Ramses III and replace him on the throne with one of his minor sons called Petaware. And we're going to talk about how that actually is probably not his real name very soon. But it was essentially this plot to both assassinate him and then place a non-crown prince. So there is a crown prince, he's Ramses IV, but they want to put this other son, this minor son of him, on the throne rather than Ramses IV. The reason it is called the Harem Conspiracy is because it is rising out of the harem itself, mainly with one of Ramses III's minor wives named Ta. As I mentioned earlier, Ramses III had 3 wives that we know of. He probably had several more, but he had 3 of that we know. His great royal wife was Isis Ta Hemjert, which means typically that the sons that he would have with his great royal wife would become first in line for the throne over any other sons of the wives, even if those sons are born before the sons of the great royal wife. We know that Isis had at least 3 sons with Ramses the Great, but it does appear that Ramses III. We're only talking about Ramses III. We're not talking about Ramses II. It does appear that Ramses III had actually chosen Ramses IV, who was the son of another wife, TT. And he chose him to be his successor. There's not 100%, it's not totally clear as to why he would choose Ramses IV over other elder sons. There is the possibility that those sons with Isis died, because we do know that a considerable amount of his sons died before him, and the potential essentially is that he had picked a successor and then his successor died, so then he has to actually pick a minor son from not the great royal wife. It's possible, Danny, but I'm not sure because I have not learned a lot about the harem, the Sea Peoples, because we're doing that in a talk in like 2 months or so. I have to do more research on such. No, the Romans. Cleopatra's son technically ruled for like 4 days, but then he was murdered as well. So then the Romans took over, and there are no pharaohs considered after that point. So we know that the secondary wife, Ta, had at least, am I reading this right? Okay, yeah. We know another secondary wife, Ta. There's TT and Ta, so don't forget the difference. Ta had at least 4 sons that we think we know about, and that she probably wants her eldest son to be the crown prince and thus first in line for the throne. I've talked about this before. The word harem does not mean the same thing in ancient Egypt like it does in other Islamic connotations. A harem is the word that Egyptologists have placed on essentially a women's focused area in the royal court. So we know that like in Islamic spaces, women were more restricted in the harem. In this case, it's not like that. It's a place for royal wives, royal children, and usually like royal mothers or royal sisters of the pharaoh to live it comfortably. That does not mean they were restricted. It doesn't really mean anything else. But it's just called harem because it should just be like the ladies section of the royal palace, but doesn't get that name. So although this conspiracy does start with this minor wife, Ta, it also was mainly organized by a court official named Pebek. There's gonna be a lot of Egyptian names, and y'all are gonna have to be patient with me because some of them are really long. Pebek Kamen. They both use their positions in court to recruit others into their plot, and then we're going to go over specific people later that get prosecuted for this crime. Because it doesn't mean of Sejin B, it means Nisu Biti, which means king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Of Sejin B is an English, like not, that's not how it's translated. It's translated into Nisu Biti, which means in ancient Egyptian, king of Upper and Lower Egypt. All right, so it is unclear how long this plot was planned for, but we actually do know the exact year, and technically we actually know the exact date that the event happened. This event took place on the 15th day of the second month of Shemu in year 31 of Ramses III's reign, which we know is probably in 1155 BCE. And we know that it most likely took place in the royal harem space that was specifically located in the western tower of Medinet Habu. So you see here on the left, this is Medinet Habu. This is the mortuary temple of Ramses III. It's got a really big wall on the end. It's got some little tiny temples, but it mostly is sort of these 3 courts. And then you see here the front end of this giant pylon. So this is meant to be a mortuary temple. It's meant to be a place where the cult of the dead king can be worshipped. It essentially is using the exact same function that a pyramid would, but during the New Kingdom, they separated it. That like the tomb is in one place and the mortuary temple is in a different place, while in the Pyramid Age, they combined the two. I know, isn't that crazy? The 15th month, it is like the Ides of March, which is so funny. So if you don't know about Medinet Habu, it is this large area on the western bank of Thebes, and it houses a lot of funerary complexes, and also settlements. Like people would also live here on this side of the Nile as well. But this is in western bank of Luxor. More than likely the name is most synonymous with this specific mortuary temple, but it is technically a name that is given to other sites that are kind of outside of these actual walls. So there are, in this area, there's also the mortuary temples of Ai, Horemheb, and Tawasret, as well as a Greco-Roman temple to Isis called Deir el Selwit, a Roman period cemetery, and then a large settlement that was probably occupied in the Pharaonic period up until the 9th century. So you saw it, if you look here, you'll see the actual temple complex, and you'll see this thing right down here. That is what the harem was. So essentially, this is immediately south of the mortuary temple is this small mud brick palace, and this is more than likely where the actual assassination took place. And I'll give you my evidence as to why in a second when we read some of the text. So this is not technically Ramses III's main palace. He probably had a main palace on the other side of the Nile. But this is a place that he would live in during major festivals that would happen at this temple, so that he didn't have to go back and forth every time. And in a way, after his death, this would also be a place of what we call the mansion of millions of years. This is essentially your house in the afterlife. The Egyptians loved using the word millions of years to essentially mean eternity. It's like they had the word for million. They didn't necessarily have the word for eternity. They just had, it's millions and millions of years. So this is what is considered his mansion of millions of years. This is where he would sort of physically live in the afterlife version of the world. Unfortunately, which is very sad. Hi Uni Booney. It's okay. You haven't missed much because I think you know a lot of this stuff. We are just getting started talking about the actual Harem Conspiracy. All we were doing before was giving some context of the 19th and 20th dynasties. I don't think you've missed that much. We haven't gotten into the actual reading of text yet. And then everything will go up on my YouTube, so you can watch it if you missed anything at the very beginning. We're talking about Medinet Habu, and that this is the mansion of millions of years that is attached to the temple and probably was where the actual assassination took place. The unfortunate thing about this very small little mansion is that it got really badly damaged in the 1913 excavation. So we have this, but you can obviously tell that this is just like the foundation walls. This is not a lot of it, a lot of the actual mansion portion. Now, why did they choose the 15th day of the second month of Shemu in the 31st year of Ramses III's reign? Why did they pick that date? They picked it because it coincides with something called the Beautiful Festival of the Valley. This is an annual festival from the Middle Kingdom and on. It is a celebration of the dead, sometimes as a remembrance of the dead, very similar, honestly, to Day of the Dead kind of festivities. And it does involve taking a sacred statue of Amun or Amun-Re, Mut, and Khonsu. So that is what we call the Theban triad. They are the three gods that are mainly worshipped in Thebes, or Waset is the ancient Egyptian name for the city. And they would take these statues from the East Bank, from the temples of Luxor and temples of Karnak, and they would bring them over to the funerary temples of all the deceased royalty in the West Bank. This is a major, major festival. You can expect the king to be staying on the West Bank in essentially his smaller palace that is attached to Medinet Habu. And the conspirators obviously knew this because they are very much intertwined into the royal family and the royal court, obviously. And one of them is literally a wife of him. So she obviously is going to know when and where he is going to be at any time. They also knew that they could use essentially the commotion of this festival to their advantage. We actually have this really cool depiction. Most of the time we don't have depictions of the actual festival, but I believe this one, I think it's from the Tomb of Noct. This is supposedly an actual depiction of the beautiful festival of the valley. And you can see here, unfortunately they are not preserved, but there are two people sitting in a chair. Typically this is like sort of supposed to be a statue of the deceased. So in this case, the family members are sort of bringing items and having festivities for that. Yes, there's absolutely reconstructions online, but actual depictions from them of this specific event are not very common. Just because it's not totally necessary to depict a festival like this in a tomb, because it's a festival of worshiping of thanking the dead and remembering the dead, and so it doesn't really need to be in tomb pictures. Taking a drink. All right. I think we're doing good time. I'm very worried we're going to run over like I do every single time I give a lecture. All right. Where was I? Okay. The men that TA enticed into the plan assassinated Ramses III by stabbing and slashing his throat. And we'll talk about how I know this in a little bit. It was originally thought by modern Egyptologists that Ramses III actually survives this attack and then died at a later time. And it is because the text that we're about to read sort of implies that he was alive to actually carry out the court proceedings. We now understand it that he did probably die, and we will look at his mummy to kind of prove that point, and that it was probably his son Ramses IV who is sort of carrying out the court proceedings in his father's name. So it doesn't actually mean he's really alive. And we'll look at his mummy to prove how we know that he definitely probably did not survive any time. All right. So let's talk about the actual assassination. Oh, so sorry. I was supposed to do that slide before. We're talking about the judicial papyrus of Turin right now. So let's give a little background of this papyri. We're going to get an ad in a second, so I might take a pause. I'll keep talking for now. So how do we know all the details of this conspiracy? Everything that I just told you guys. This is one of the main reasons why. There are a few different papyri, but it's mainly this one. Yes, addicted. Yes, it is. We will talk about his mummy at the very end. But this papyri is called the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, also called the Turin Legal Papyrus. It is located in Turin, Italy, at the Egyptian Museum there. And this is the largest and most complete of a series of documents that refers to this conspiracy. Yes, so we'll look at, I'm going to read out the text to all of you guys. You'll see that it's not necessarily like the event is fully recorded. There is one papyri that gives a lot of details, but mostly it's the court proceedings afterwards that are more recorded, but not exactly the proceedings, but almost a summary of the court. So one of the problems is that we don't know where, I think, any of these papyri are found. We have 5 papyri. I know this guy's got a crazy mustache. We are 5 or 6 papyri that talk about the Harem Conspiracy. None of them have what we call provenience, which is the exact excavation location. So the exact location of where this papyri was found. None of them. And it's unfortunately super common for papyri because they were either looted and then sold on the antiquities market, or people like this, I'm going to say asshole, love to just steal shit and not record anything because they're not archaeologists. These guys are so early that they are just explorers and treasure hunters at this point. So we know that it was discovered sometime before 1824, and it was donated to the Turin Museum by this dude, Bernardino Drovetti, who is an Italian antiquities collector, diplomat, politician, and albeit asshole. We're just gonna say it. My favorite thing about him is that he is literally described as an antiquities looter on his Wikipedia, because he's apparently remembered for his ruthlessness towards other collectors and excavators in Egypt. He apparently allowed his agents to harass different actual archaeologists that were coming out, and was deemed careless and unscrupulous and their conduct towards their discoveries. And like, yes, a lot of these people in the mid 1800s they're doing crazy things. This is the first time I've seen somebody like actually get fully ripped to shreds via his Wikipedia. Like, most of the things they sort of just like brush over it. This guy's getting ripped to shreds on his Wikipedia, so I'm very glad. We're gonna snooze that ad for just a second, and we'll take a pause when the ad actually comes back. But yeah, I really liked how he was just like fully getting ripped apart on his Wikipedia page. But you're like, it's very, very funny because the people that he is noted as being very hostile to are pretty much doing the same thing. But again, people nowadays are not like saying that they were rude. They are just still people who were doing stuff. So we have Henry Salt, and Giovanni Belzoni. These are 2 of these explorers that are specifically going out to buy objects for the British Museum. And then Jean-Francois Champollion, who wasn't really an archaeologist in much sense. He's more of a linguist, but he did go to Egypt and do stuff. And like, all 3 of these people are in these sort of like early world of Egyptology. They're not archaeologists. They are not actually conducting scientific archaeological excavations. They are really just trying to like get items that look pretty to put in a museum, pretty much. Anakin, this guy is absolutely on that same level. I'm just so surprised because like, I feel like most of these early Egyptology explorers, we do talk about their methods being bad, but like, unfortunately, everything has got to be put into context. you have to look at why they were doing these things. Again, they were doing these things to put nice art pieces in a museum. They were not doing these things particularly to learn or to particularly to unveil new things. And so most of the time I have to give them some sort of credence that they are just like, it's all a matter of perspective. This guy just genuinely seems like an asshole. Hi, Tax2, welcome on in. The other thing that's very interesting about this man is that supposedly after he did all of this shit, he lost his mind and he was confined in a lunatic asylum in Turin where he eventually died. So do I feel bad? I don't know. I kind of feel a touch bad, but I feel like he may have had some mental health problems. And maybe that's why he was so mean to people. Yeah, or his conscience caught up with him. That is very true, Baha. Yeah, most of his collection he was collecting specifically for like the Turin Museum. And so most of the things that he collected specifically went to Turin. And Turin does have an amazing Egyptian collection, but it doesn't have a lot of great until later. They do have some great Italian archaeologists who have actually excavated in Egypt and brought items back for the museum. But a lot of, I think, the early stuff, especially the papyri. They apparently have a very, very large papyri collection, and a lot of it is unprovenienced, which is unfortunately really common. Papyri, I think modern Egyptians at that time knew that those would be very valuable, and so they would potentially loot tombs for those or find those and then sell them. It's unfortunately pretty common. Most papyri don't have a very good provenance. All right, I know we're gonna get an ad in a second, so any questions so far? We'll take some questions right now and then we'll do the ad. But any questions? We will be going over the full translation of the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, as well as some of the other items. This is a long translation, so we will struggle through it. It's very repetitive, as most ancient Egyptian texts are, and there are a lot of really complicated Egyptian names that I am going to try to read. That is a very good question, Unibuni. I do believe that there are, I'm going to say, rumors of other pharaohs being assassinated. Nothing that is anywhere as concrete as this one. I know that there's like, I think it's like either Manetho or Herodotus, whoever recorded a list of like the histories of Egypt. There were some old kingdom pharaohs that they very casually sort of just mentioned, oh yeah, and he was assassinated. But like, I don't think we know 100% any other ones that were 100% assassinated. There are definitely pharaohs that were ousted, like in the intermediate periods. Some of the stuff doesn't make any sense, and it just seems like they can shift and move people around. Why didn't the Romans identify as Egyptians when they saw how old their history was? Because they're not Egyptians? I'm confused by your question. Akhenaten was not assassinated. No, there is no confirmation that he was assassinated. He died. We don't know how, but he died. Matt, we will talk about this in a second, but yes, the pharaoh absolutely would have guards. But we're going to talk about why this guy maybe didn't have enough guards, or maybe didn't have the right guards. But yes, pharaohs absolutely would have lots of guards. There's a title that we know of called fan bearer on the right side of the king. It sometimes is literally person who's just fanning the king, but sometimes that has been described as bodyguard, as like a close confidant, somebody who's always next to the king. So there are absolutely bodyguards, but we'll talk about it in a second as to what happened and why where were the guards the night of this assassination? Is the ad gonna come or not? There it is. All right, 3 minutes. I kind of want some corn nuts. Let me get some corn nuts. Oh, I forgot to show you guys what I got. Well, you'll find out soon, Matt. You'll find out soon. I got my I got my cast iron Sphinx bookends this morning. They're actually not nearly as heavy as I thought they would be, but they're really cute. I love them. Just gotta figure out where to put them. Especially considering I do have bookend things that keep the books where they are, so these are just gonna be purely decorative. Yeah, now you don't get asthma. Now you get to listen to me talk about random things that can spill corn nuts all over the floor. I actually genuinely spilled at least 2 on the floor. I don't know where it went. The corn nut crumbs are some of the worst things because they're so tiny. Corn nuts. I have visited Luxor. I visited Cairo and Luxor. We're also planning a 2027 Egypt trip where we'll go to Cairo and Luxor again. That's actually very funny because I was thinking about it. I need some sort of basket for all my corn nuts because they're all just kind of sitting there on like a random shelf. I bookended my corn nuts. You can't see it, but I did do that. All right, one more minute. I have, Matt. I've been inside many tombs. 2 pyramids. 2 pyramids. At least, or no, 3 pyramids. 3 pyramids. I always forget the step pyramid I went inside. 3 pyramids. Probably 4 mastaba tombs. Maybe 5. Maybe 5 mastaba tombs. Then, what is it? I went to 11 tombs of the Valley of the Kings. I went to 3 tombs in the Valley of the Queens. I went into 5 tombs in Deir el-Medina. And then I went into like maybe 9 tombs of the nobles. That one's harder to count because I can't remember. But I've been in a lot of tombs. If you can tell, I'm a tomb person. I'm not a temple person. So I didn't actually go to Medinet Habu. I didn't go to Medinet Habu or the Ramesseum, but I went to a lot of tombs when I was in Luxor. So most people, when you go to the Valley of the Kings, you can only go to, your ticket gets you into 3 tombs, and then there are 3 extra tickets that you can buy that get you into 3 other tombs, like special tombs. I had a special ticket that allowed me to get into every single tomb except 1. So we did that. So we went to 11. I think there were 12 and we went to 11. No, we have instruments that can kind of give us a best guess of what music would have been like in ancient Egypt, but we don't have any musical notation, and you would have to essentially go off of what those instruments look like. But we don't have any sort of notation to tell us how they would be played or anything like that. All right, back. All right, so let's talk about the Judicial Papyrus of Turin. And so while the unfortunate thing is that we don't have sort of the understanding as to where this papyrus was kept. Was this kept in a tomb? Was this kept in a temple? Like, we don't have that background. We do know that it does date immediately after the conspiracy takes place. And the papyrus was not reused, which is actually really common for a lot of papyri, that one side will be used for one thing and the next side will be used for something else. So it is very rare that there is nothing on, as we call the verso, the opposite side. There's nothing on the back of this papyrus. It is just talking about this one topic. One thing that is very odd about ancient Egyptian papyri is that linguists really need to go into the text and evaluate it to see essentially if this is a later copy of an older text. One of the ways they can find this is that they can look for specific phrases, specific writings of certain words to see that if it dates to the Middle Kingdom or if it dates to the Old Kingdom, and that somebody essentially has been copying it over. It's a really, really hard thing. It's something that obviously a linguist would have to do, and they have to be able to recognize like all of these different terminologies and hieratic writing and all of this stuff. But We know that a lot of the papyri and ostraca, which are pieces of random limestone or pieces of pottery that have writing on it, we know a lot of those are made because scribes are copying older texts while they are learning how to write, while they are in training and while they're practicing. So there's a ton of texts that we know probably date earlier, but the only one preserved we have comes from a later time period. So this piece appears to have been written as a summary document, and there's the possibility that this piece was actually hung up on a wall, potentially of a temple, for those to essentially read and to be essentially deterred from committing treason. Obviously, this would only be for those literate to read, but there's the potential that this maybe was hung up on some sort of wall somewhere that would tell you more about this court case. There is also a portion of this document that does appear to be missing. The current theory is that it was actually separated by probably a modern thief, because he carefully cut this document to make sure he actually didn't damage the text itself. So there's essentially like a straight line. I think, let me look at the longer picture. Probably either here or there. There's like a straight line that was cut. That appears that it may have been separated, presumably by a modern thief to make more money, by splitting them up and selling them separately. But there has no papyri that would fit this has been discovered. It could have been in antiquity, but I feel like it has to be sort of possibly more modern. So I also want to mention that there are other papyri that also talk about this conspiracy that have survived. And as you can see, they're much smaller. They're very tiny, little tiny sections. And we're going to go through, I'm going to give you kind of the background of all of these, and then we'll go into the translations. So we have from left to right, although there's one picture, one of the papyri I can't find a picture of. So on the right here, we have Papyrus Rollin, we have Papyrus Lee down here, the two on the bottom. And then we have, there's Papyrus Rephode 1 and 2, which I don't have a photo of. And then this is a small section called Papyrus Varzi. And originally when I was making this lecture, we were just going to focus on the Turin judicial papyrus. And then when I discovered actual translations for these ones, I was like, never mind, we're going to cover all of them. So that's why this lecture is going to be so long. So here is Papyrus Rollin. This is currently located at the National Library of France in their Department of Manuscripts. There are only 5 lines of hieratic script in black ink. And again, this most likely dates to the 19th dynasty around the time of Ramses III. It appears that it was purchased by the Cabinet de Médailles from Claude Camille Rollin in 1846. He was a French dealer who ran an antiquities dealership in the 1830s and 1880s. And again, complete unclear provenience of where this papyrus originally came from. But it's not unheard of that these might have been found in the same location, because what is that, 1846 and 1824. Okay, so the other one was donated much earlier, 1824, but listen to the dates as I talk about them. The next one we have is Papyrus Lee. So there is a assumption that Papyrus Rollin and Papyrus Lee were once one papyrus that has been cut in 2. So the Lee papyrus was bought by Dr. Lee at Mr. Burton's sale, and I believe Mr. Burton is Guy Burton, who's an Egyptologist. It was then purchased by the Lord Amherst of Hackney with Dr. Lee's Egyptian collection in 1868. There appears that there were 2 portions of this papyrus that were sold. Hi, Ludo! Taking a pause. Welcome on in! Shout out to Ludo. Welcome on Rin Raiders. What were you doing today? You're playing Relooted. How do you like Relooted? We've been thinking about playing it. We played it. We played the demo of it a couple weeks ago. Months ago. Maybe in December. Ooh, what's this game? That looks cool. But welcome on in, everybody. My name is MelissainDeNile. I am in denial in more ways than one. I am an Egyptologist archaeologist, and I stream Egyptology and archaeology games here on Twitch. And we also do lectures. So it is season 4 of Beyond Nile lecture series. So this is our first lecture of the year. And we are talking about the Harem Conspiracy tonight, which is an event in Egypt, where the Pharaoh Ramses III was assassinated. So we are looking at some of the papyri, and then we're going to read some translations of the papyri that tell us about this assassination. That's so cool. We did the demo and I liked it. I liked the concept of the game. Looks great. The art looks great. Side scrollers are not totally my thing. We'll probably play it eventually, but we did play the demo to try it out. But yeah, I sense that it has weird feelings about museums. So that is going to be a hard topic that we will cover when we play the game. But welcome on in, everybody. Feel free, sit back. Ludo, if you need to raid and rest, feel free. But thank you for bringing them over here. And I'm just going to be talking at you for I don't even know how much longer. It's going to be a long lecture. I feel like, I think we'll be fine. But we are getting started. We're telling about the main papyrus that people know about a lot that talks about the Harem Conspiracy is this one, the Judicial Papyrus of Turin. But there are more, and so I'm talking about the more, and then we're going to read translations of them. So, where was I? So this was purchased by Lord Amherst of Hackney when he purchased Dr. Lee's entire Egyptian collection around 1868. There were 2 portions of the papyrus, and they were sold, and then apparently were arranged in the wrong order when it was originally mounted, and then in 1892 they actually figured out what order it was supposed to be in. But here you can just see there are 2 separate pieces of it. It doesn't appear that they have been permanently reattached at all. And although this is called Papyrus Lee, it's also called Papyrus Amherst 5.1 and 5.2. And again, it's because it's in the collection of Lord Amherst, along with countless other papyri from the Pharaonic period, as well as some Greco-Roman papyrus as well. His entire collection of papyri is now at the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City. And that is because J. Pierpont Morgan, not an Egyptologist at all, purchased a very large collection of Lord Amherst collection in 1912. So it is in the Morgan Library. I unfortunately don't think either of these are on display, and you can see they're not even in the best condition. But hopefully they're getting good care there. The next one, we unfortunately don't have a picture of it. I tried to get a picture of this. I tried to figure out a translation of it, and these are eluding me. I don't even have any indication of where it actually is located. What museum? No idea. So I have a publication from 1952 that says it supposedly has a translation of this text, but it's all in French. And it didn't appear to have a full translation. I think it just sort of evaluates some of the phrases from the text. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't have the time to translate it from French to be able to figure it out for this lecture. I think this papyrus might be in Turin, but I have no idea. We do know that it gets its name from Jean-Jacques Riffaud, who was a French sculptor and excavator. Thank you, Steph. Maybe I will send it your way and see what I can find, because most of the time when you translate a text, you either have the hieroglyphs in the translation or you have the whole thing in quotes, and the entire paper was not that. And I was like, God dang it, I don't even know where to start. I technically can speak French, but not enough to translate a very long paper. But I will hit you up next time I need that. So we know that Jean-Jacques Riffaud arrives in Egypt in 1814, where he actually carried excavations for Drovetti, the guy who gave the Turin papyrus to Turin. So we know this guy Riffaud excavated in Thebes, the Fayum, and the Delta, but his work's very unscientific, very hasty, not very well recorded. But that is why I think maybe this might be in Turin. I'm not 100% sure, but because it's associated with Drovetti, I feel like it might be there. We do know that the papyrus was published in a large book that Riffaud wrote, And he actually planned to have 5 volumes of this book, but only a volume of plates was actually completed in Paris in the 1830s. But that is it. We also know Rufod's papers are in Geneva, so that's a possibility. Maybe that's where these papyri are. Hi, traveler. I am also an archaeologist. I have not excavated in Egypt, but I've excavated along the east coast of the United States, in England, and in Italy. But yeah, welcome on in. We're talking about the Harem Conspiracy tonight. I gotta get closer so that I can... What time period do you excavate/study, traveler? I'm gonna have a corn nut. Oh, Mississippian. Very cool. Very, very cool. I gotta learn more about that. I love Native American stuff, but I have never really studied the Mississippian that much. But welcome on in. We're talking about the Harem Conspiracy and all the papyri that talk about it. So this one is called Papyrus Farsi. The reason we're talking about this last is that it is not 100% talking about the Harem Conspiracy, but there's one author who thinks that it might be. So we're including it just in case. So this is located in the city of Varzy, which is a very small city in kind of the dead center of France. It's specifically located at the Auguste Grasset Museum, which is named after the collector who collected these items. He claims that he found this in a sarcophagus of a mummy, which was laid in the king's residence in Thebes. And it is completely unclear what any of that means. Like, I don't know what it means, king's residence of, like, the palace of the, like, completely unclear. Not specific enough. We do know that it dates to the reign of Ramses III, and it bears 4 essentially incomplete lines of text in hieratic. Out of all these papyrus, it is technically the most recent to sort of been, again, associated with the Harem's conspiracy. And it's obviously very incomplete, but it only really seems to have been proposed that it includes the Harem Conspiracy in 2001. This author, Yvon Koenig, I think is how you say his last name. He essentially argues that the use of an expression that is found in the Rufod papyri was first actually discovered in this papyri. So he concludes that this may have been part of the same manuscript along with the Lee papyrus. Max! Free digital hieroglyphs, OMG. Please send me either a DM here on Twitch or a DM on Discord with the name of the person that you want to get free hieroglyphs. Usually just the first name. I can do the last name if you need, but it might not fit. But definitely the first name. And your pronouns. Whoever's pronouns it is. A male, he, she, they, whatever you would like. Please DM me those. And I will hopefully... Actually, I have off tomorrow. I can probably get those done by tomorrow and get those sent over to you. But congratulations! Yay! Free hieroglyphs. If not, I'm gonna have to pester you because I'm gonna forget about it. So send me a message with all of that information and I will get that sent over to you. Thank you so much. All right, let's talk about the characters that are mentioned in the Harem Conspiracy Papyrus, which I will mention because we're going to read it in a second. But I wanted to give this little background of some of the people to expect as I'm reading out the translation. So the big thing that I want you to understand is that there's a very high possibility that all of the names of the people mentioned in these papyri are all fake names. They are all pseudonyms. It could be for a variety of reasons, but I feel like the largest reason essentially is that the ancient Egyptian name of a person is considered one part of the soul of that person. Their Ren, that is the word for name, their Ren is a part of their soul, and if you know somebody's name, you have power over them. But you can also, it also allows you to remember somebody and keep their memory alive by knowing their name. And when you're going into the afterlife, one of the things that's mentioned in the Book of the Dead and the Book of the Gates is that you need to know the name of demons so that you have power over them. And so by knowing somebody's name, you can help them survive in the real world. But what would then be a very big insult to a person who does not deserve that is to make up a fake name for them and not remember their name. Like, this is like a almost purposeful not remember their name. And it is true of a lot of culture stuff. This is so similar if you've ever watched the movie Coco, and the whole concept of like keeping somebody in your memory keeps them alive in the afterlife. It's very, very similar to this. And so one of the ways that you can full insult somebody is purposely forget their name and purposely think of a name that is not their name. So in this case, they are not, they are essentially not wanting those names to be recorded because these are the villains. If in the case that you think of, these are the people that you don't want to remember because they're villains, they're evil, and they've done this horrible deed. So I want to look through some of these names so that you guys can get a little context of what their name means, because as you know, ancient Egyptian names mean things. They straight up are full sentences. It's okay, Steph. It's if you accept the duel, your little avatars on the bottom duel each other, and you fight. I think you just have to click. It's just like a little mini game, yeah. But you do not have to. Okay, so first and foremost, we do not know that the queen, TA, as she is named in the papyri, we have no idea if that's her real name. I actually did a little bit of research, based on like her Wikipedia and some other sources that I was looking at. Like, there are 4 children sort of associated with her. And what I realized what happened is when I went to those children's Wikipedia pages or other sources, they could not name her specifically as their mother. Like, there was no sort of text saying that this is my mother's name. And so there's a high possibility that Tia is not her real name. And that is a fake name that is given to her. And it's just sort of an assumption that we're just trying to figure it out. No, so they are purposely not using their name to like banish them from the afterlife, pretty much. Like, they are purposely being cruel to them because they are evil in that way. It has nothing to do with them being afraid. This is a punishment for them. Because if you don't have your name, you can't go to the afterlife and you can't live the extra life that they are given, or that they believe that they are given. You guys dueling? You guys are dueling. Who is it? It's Cyrus and Hathor. They're dueling. So yeah, Queen Tia, no idea if it's her name. Here are some of the names that are mentioned in the text, and these are actually distorted names. And so there's this guy, Bin M. Waset. It means evil one in Thebes. No parent is going to name their child like that. There's a theory that it might be a distortion of his real name. Hi Dash, welcome on in. We're doing great. It was a little crazy at the beginning, but people are crazy, and that's okay. We figured it out. But we're talking about some of the distorting of the names of those of the villains and the culprits in the Harem Conspiracy. So his name meaning Bin M. Waset, evil one in Thebes. His original name may have been close. It may have been Nefer M. Waset, meaning the good one in Thebes. But it's been changed to Bin, the evil one in Thebes. We also have, this guy that I mentioned before, Pa'i Bak Kamen, this blind servant. Probably not his real name. We have Mesed Su Ra. Ra hates him, which is like the worst. You have Pa-in Iuk, the snake demon. You have Pa-Ra Kamen F. Ra blinds him. You have Shad Mes. Oh God, this is one. That Shad Mesjer F. His ear is cut off. And then you have a Pen Huti Bin, this evil Hui. So Hui might be his name. He might have been, his original name was just Hui, and then they just added it and said this evil Hui. They just like give him the extra thing. But yeah, so this is like, there's a really great article that you can read. It's for free. It's on Academia. It's called Convicting Great Criminals, A New Look at Punishment in the Turin Judicial Papyrus, is one of my sources for this lecture. It was really interesting to read. Oh yeah, you're right. That is true. Yeah, it is a smaller version of Amenhotep. I forgot about that. No problem. Keep working, Dash. You're fine. Absolutely. All this, you can obviously watch this later, but then this also will get put up on my YouTube page as well. All right, let's get into the translations. The Turin Museum has this really cool infographic of the papyri. I don't know why it is so beige. I for some reason I thought it was I thought it looked like the papyrus at first. No, so Pentaware, you're right. Pentaware, we don't know if it says actual name as well. I forgot to include that one, but yes, Pentaware is also no indication that is his actual name. I don't know what it translates to though. I'm mad I didn't look that up. But no, Pentaware is probably not the prince's name. Hui, H-U-Y, but similar. So when you go to the Turin Museum's website, they have this big infographic. It pops up as a giant PDF, and it has the papyri here at the top, and then it has the translation here at the bottom in Italian and in English, but I copied it all over so that we don't have to look at it and read it in very, very small font. As you will see, this papyrus, you actually read from right to left. And this portion here on the right is the least preserved area. So this first section, we have barely any words or full sentences. But then you do have a lot of like full translations at the end. All right, first section. So what I just cropped it out and showed you guys what it looks like. So there's not much in here, but essentially it's been determined it's an introductory speech by the Pharaoh. Up here at the very, very top, there is a small fragment that has the king's name, ruler of Heliopolis, which would be Ramses III. So literally the words are, son of Re, Ramses, ruler of Heliopolis, may he live, prosper, and be healthy, said. And then we have ... the land of ... the whole land ... their cattle ... that they may have been brought to ... all ... before them ... all brought ... the people saying ... as they are. Unfortunately, that's all we got. But everything else is in much better condition. So let's keep going. So our second section is going to be translated as such. The king appoints an investigation committee. The abomination of the land. I commissioned the overseer of the treasury, Mont M. Tawi, the overseer of the treasury, Pa Yi Fru, the standard bearer, Care, the cupbearer, Pa Bez, the cupbearer, Ked N. Dena, the cupbearer, Bal Mer, the cupbearer, Per Sunu, the cupbearer, Jehudi Rek Nefer, the king's herald, Pa En Er Enet Ut, the scribe Mai, the scribe of the archives, Par M. Heb, the standard bearer of the infantry Hori, saying, I'll explain, he is appointing judges. He's appointing people who are judging and going to do the investigation. So as you can see, all their titles and their names. So these are so one thing, a cupbearer is like, yes, it's an important task. It's somebody who's bringing the cup. This also could be a taster, which is a trusted person, obviously, because they are tasting for poison every single time. So you probably had a lot. But yeah, we got cupbearers, we have overseer of the treasury. Obviously, he's a pretty high position. Standard bearer of the infantry is definitely interesting. Scribe of the archives, very interesting titles that you can see. But these are the trusted men that have been trusted to do the investigation and be the judges, essentially, in this case. I think there are 12 in total. So all of them are saying, quote, as for the matters which these people, I do not know who, have plotted, go and examine them. Oh, sorry. No, the king is saying that. Sorry. The king is saying, As for the matters which these people, I do not know who, have plotted, go and examine them. He's telling these 12 people to go and examine them. And they went and examined them, and caused to die those whom they caused to die by their own hands, though I do not know who, and they also punished the others, though I do not know who. But I had given them instructions, saying, quote, mind you, be careful, lest you allow that somebody be punished wrongfully, and by somebody who is not above him, end quote. Thus I spoke to them again and again. So again, these are the judges in the case, and these are the people that are going out. They're not just even the judges, they're the investigators. They're the people who are supposed to be figuring out what it is. Obviously, this kind of brings up that people thought that Ramses the Great was still alive, Ramses the Third was still alive, because it's happening in his voice, if that makes sense. The king is going out and saying it, but obviously it is not actually the king. It is probably Ramses the Fourth, his son, who takes the throne. But it's kind of interesting that you wouldn't really think that a cupbearer or a standard bearer of the infantry would be somebody who would actually go out and do this investigation. But you also think that they're very trusted people, and they're people that can weave in and out of the community and the court to be able to get this information. Yeah, so a lot of this text is going to sound like it's in first person because it's the king is thinking and the king is doing stuff. This is not going to be a typical court proceedings, but this is very typical for ancient Egyptian texts. A lot of times the ancient Egyptian, even literature stories it's a story, but it's being told by someone. At the very, very beginning, somebody is telling this story. And so they say, me saying this, and then they say the story. So it's pretty common practice for how they write their text. Third section, it's very small, even though there is a break kind of in the text, but it's mostly a blank. So this is pretty easy. It just says the king, it's kind of a linguistic thing. It's kind of just a preference with an ancient Egyptian, that they sort of, orate sort of in that way. It could be an indication that the king is not actually writing it. He's speaking it out loud and somebody's recording it, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know enough about other ancient texts to know if it's like a common linguistic thing. I just know a lot from Egyptian. It's pretty common. So the third section says, the king washes his hands of all of it. See, they do switch. Now they're not in first person. As to all that has been done, it is they who have done it. May all of that... See, this is so hard because I keep adding English words. May all they have done fall on their own heads, while I am exempted and protected forever among the just kings who are before. Amun-Re, king of the gods, before Osiris, ruler of eternity. Now, this is where we get chunky. This is where we go through the accused and their titles and their punishments. Remember, this is not a court proceedings. This is a summary. This is like the newsreel that happens after the court has already happened. So we're not getting how many times have these people been questioned? What are they saying in their testimonies? We're not getting any of that. We're getting the list of the accused, what their title was, how close they were to the Pharaoh, and then how they are punished. That is what we are getting in this text. The other texts have a little bit more specific of the events. This is, again, this kind of final summary. It is not explicitly said in this section, but the punishment for all of the people in this section is going to be execution. You'll notice it's not explicitly said, which sounds silly, but you'll hear it when I say it. But it's all of these people were executed. And the majority of the text is grouped by punishment. So we got executions first, and then we'll have more stuff, and then it will get the lesser and lesser punishments. This is the highest punishment. So first list, men brought in front of the committee and questioned on whom their punishment is inflicted. Men brought in for the great crimes they had committed and placed in the court in front of the great officials of the court to be examined by the treasurer Montu M. Tawi, the treasurer Pi F. Rui, the standard bearer Care, the cup bearer Pibes, the scribe May of the archive, the fan bearer Hori. They examined them, they found them guilty, and they caused their punishment to overtake them. They use these like not very specific, very vague. They caused their punishment to overtake them. We interpret that as execution. And you can see that these are some of the judges that are mentioned earlier in the text. So, the great criminal Pai Bak Kamen, formerly chief of the chamber. He was brought in because he had colluded with Ta and the women of the harem. He had made common cause with them. He had begun to bring their words out to their mothers and brothers who were there, quote, stir up the people, incite enmity in order to make rebellion against their lord, end quote. He was placed before the great officials of the court. They examined his crimes. They found he had committed them. His crimes seized him. The officials who examined him caused his punishment to overtake him. Oh God, yeah. It's so Egyptian. Like, I can always tell when, like, if a video game is like making a fake, like, reading a papyrus, I'm like, you're reading it way too accurately. That's not what it sounds like. Like, it's always the phrasing always is very vague sometimes. So yeah, so this is the big guy. This is like, he is the first person who is listed on this list. Yes, very passive, very, very passive. So Pai Bak Kamen is the really big, he is the big dude. This is the guy whose name is This Blind Servant, which is probably obviously not his name. But it tells you that he colluded with Ta and the other women of the harem. And I love the quote, stir up the people, incite enmity in order to make a rebellion against their lord. I wanted that to be the title of this lecture, but it was too long. But it's a really cool, like, almost possible real quote. I don't know, but maybe they summarized, but this guy wanted to cause a rebellion for sure. So, second one, the great criminal Mesed Sure, formerly a cupbearer. He was brought in because he had colluded with Pai Bak Kamen, who had been the chief of the chamber, and with the women to incite enmity that they may rebel against their lord. He was placed before the great officials of the court. They examined his crimes. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. As you guys will see, this will become extremely repetitive, so bear with me. The great criminal Pai Ni Uk, formerly an overseer of the royal itinerant harem. He was brought in because he had colluded with Pai Bak Kamen and Mesed Sure to stir up rebellion against their lord. He was placed before the great officials of the court. They examined his crimes. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Pen Dua, formerly a scribe of the royal itinerant harem. He was brought in because he had colluded with Pai Bak Kamen, Mesed Sure, and this other great criminal who had been overseer of the royal harem. He was placed before the officials of the court. They examined his crimes. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Pat Jiao M.D. Amun, which is like the longest name ever, formerly the inspector of the royal itinerant harem. He was brought in because he had heard the matters Okay, this is slightly different. He was brought in because he had heard the matters the men had plotted with the women of the harem and had not reported them. He was placed before the great officials of the court. They examined his crimes. They found him guilty, and they caused his punishment to overtake him. This is the first person on this list who didn't have anything to do with the plot, but had heard about the plot and didn't do anything about it, which is not nearly as bad, but obviously bad enough for him to be executed. The great criminal Kerpes, formerly the inspector of the royal itinerant harem. He was brought in for the matters that he had heard but concealed. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. As you see, they summarized. He heard but concealed. Isn't that very interesting? He heard but concealed. How have I won the jump catch twice and I haven't even tried? The great criminal Kam Empetz, formerly an inspector of the royal itinerant harem, he was brought in for the matters that he had heard but concealed. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Kam Mal, formerly inspector of the royal itinerant harem, he was brought in for the matters that he had heard but concealed. He was placed before officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. I know well, so you can see that these guys are titles. They are inspectors of the royal harem. Inspector is probably not the right word. It's probably like an overseer. It's probably somebody who's just taking care of the harem. But obviously all these guys are working very close with the harem and have heard things and just didn't do anything about it. Or maybe they didn't. Who knows? The great criminal Seth M. Per Jehudi, formerly an inspector of the royal itinerant harem, he was brought in for the matters he had heard but concealed. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Seth M. Per Amun, formerly an inspector of the royal itinerant harem, he was brought in for the matters that he had heard but concealed. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Wei Ren, formerly a cupbearer, he was brought in because he had heard the matters from this chief of the chamber he had been with, but he had concealed them. He had not reported them. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishments to overtake him. The great criminal Ash A. Eb Said, formerly Pai Bak Kamen's assistant. He was brought in because he heard the matters from this chief of the chamber he had been with, but he had not reported them. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Pei Luca, formerly a cupbearer and scribe of the treasury. Isn't that interesting that he is both a cupbearer, but he is a scribe of the treasury? That is an insanely high title that you would not typically associate that he is also a cupbearer, which to me has instantly elevated the title of cupbearer from a random servant to somebody who is very trusted and also literate, more than likely, if he is also a scribe of the treasury. Obviously, not every cupbearer appears to have both these titles, but Pei Luca apparently is like high up there on the list, which is very fascinating to me that somebody would have two titles that seem to sort of contradict each other in a way. I think a cupbearer is a taster, so I no matter what think that there's actually I think they are definitely a taster, which obviously again gives you a lot of trust in that person to be able to trust that you're tasting them and like also honor that they are potentially putting their lives at risk. But it also doesn't mean that you have to be literate. That's kind of the funny part about this is that yes, it does appear that a cupbearer absolutely has a much higher closeness with the pharaoh and with the royal court, but it doesn't still necessarily mean you have to be literate. And this guy was, which is so fascinating to me, that you can have sort of these two titles that essentially like contradict like how much it would be. Oh my God, Baha, that makes sense. Wait, okay. That actually makes a shit ton of sense because a treasury does not hold like coins. A treasury holds more than that. It holds wine. I bet he may have been like ahead. No, you actually genuinely said something smart. He had to read the labels on the wine jars. I think that's genuinely what he did. I feel like he probably is like maybe the head of the, like he is somebody who is going and he's seeing where the wine is coming from or the beer is coming from so that he knows where it's coming from. Like that makes so much sense. An ancient sommelier. Yeah, royal seals to put on wine jars. Yeah, absolutely. That makes like a lot of sense. But it is very fascinating that all of these people, the failure to report something is that important. And when you guys see some of the people that we're going to talk about later, I want you to think about if that was sort of justified. Because we're going to talk about some other people who don't get executed, who definitely did stuff. And we'll look into it. So, where was I? got one more. So the great criminal, the Libyan, Ini, formerly a cupbearer. He was brought in because he had been in collusion with Pai Bak Kamen. He had heard the matters from him, but he had not reported them. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. And if you thought this was over, it's not. This is still the first list of the accused. It's just continuing on the 5th section. So this is one of my favorite ones, though. Wives of men of the gate of the harem, who had united with the men who plotted the matters. They were placed before the officials of the court. They found them guilty. They caused their punishment to overtake them. And then it just says 6 women. So they are not named. We don't know anything about them. We don't even know if Queen Tia is included in this 6 women. We can assume she probably is, but we are not 100% sure. Yes, execution would probably be something along beheading. We don't know a lot. We don't know a lot about full executions, unfortunately, but beheading is possible. There's also the possibility of burning, either burning alive or get your head chopped off and then get burning. Burning is a possibility, and it is exponentially worse because, again, it is destroying your body so that you cannot go to the afterlife. It's like why they didn't do cremation in Egypt, because it goes against everything that they believe about the afterlife and how you do it. We're going to talk about it in a little bit about what is the worst punishment on this list. So we're going to talk about it a little bit in a second. But yeah, we don't 100% know what executions would really be like. Let me take a drink. We're making good time. I actually think we're gonna finish this on time, guys. Oh my gosh. So exciting. Okay. So yes, the 5th section is just the first list of the accused repeated or continued. So we have these 6 women. I like how they're saying wives of the men of the gate of the harem. So specifically, these are not women, which sounds weird to say it. These are not women of the harem. These are women who are married to the men of the gate of the harem, which in my mind, a person of the gate of the harem is a bodyguard, is like a guard, not the actual women living in the harem, which would have been wives of Ramses III, children of Ramses III, sisters of Ramses III. So I think that this section actually might not include Queen Tia. This might include other women who were executed because of this. And this specifically, they say they united with the men who plotted the matter. So these are not women who heard about it and then didn't tell anybody. These are women who united with them to continue the plot. So it's unclear where these women sort of stand, how they are related to everything, and of course, no names. We can all debate this later about why they are not named. We'll debate it a little bit later. I want you all to think about some reasonings, maybe why they wouldn't have named any of these women. Next one. The great criminal Pi Re, son of Ruma, formerly an overseer of the treasury. Again, really big title. He was brought in because he had been in collusion with the great criminal Payan Hu Bin. He had made common cause with him to incite enmity, to make rebellion against their lord. He was placed before the officials of the court. They found him guilty. They caused his punishment to overtake him. The great criminal Bin M. Waset, remember, evil in Thebes, formerly a captain of archers of Nubia. Very interesting title. He was brought in because his sister, who was in the itinerant harem, had written to him saying, quote, "Stir up people, make enmity, and come back to make rebellion against your lord." End quote. This is fascinating. This is probably my most fascinating accused person because it gives so much interesting detail. That's definitely possible, Matt. Yeah. And this is so interesting. So it says his sister is in the harem. Again, unclear how she is in the harem, because we do assume that an ancient Egyptian pharaoh's harem would have women that are not technically his wives. So maybe that's it. But she could have also been a servant to one of the queens, one of the children. She could have been anything, really. There's a lot of options. But I find this the most interesting one because his sister writes a letter to him, who is the captain of archers. So he has a pretty high position in the military. And she's trying to entice him to Yeah, lady in waiting is definitely possible. Yeah, there's a very large percentage of women that are going to be in this harem that range from all the way to the queens of the pharaoh, the sisters of the pharaoh, the children of the pharaoh. But then there will absolutely be servants, ladies in waiting, wives of royal officials are probably included in this as well. And then you have the potential of like courtesans or other women that would perform sexual favors with the king. And then just like genuinely servants, cooks, cupbearers, all of these things. So there's a very wide range of what this woman could possibly be. Because it just says sister who is in the harem, I would suspect not a royal person. I would not suspect that this is a queen or a daughter or anything. This is probably a lady in waiting or a servant. Bin Waset, he was placed before Ked en Dena, Balmer, Per Sunu, and Jehudi Rek Nefer, the judges. They examined him, they found him guilty, and they caused his punishment to overtake him. Now, where you see this gap here, we are now into the second list of the accused. And you guys will see that the punishments get a change after this second list. So, persons brought in because of their crimes, because they had been in collusion with Pi Bak Kamen, Payez Pentaweret. There's the son, Pentawere. They were placed before the officials of the court in order to be examined. They found them guilty. They left them on their own in the court. They took their own lives, no harm having been done to them. So now we have the list. The great criminal Payez, who was formerly commander of the army. Great criminal Mes-Yu, formerly a scribe of the House of Life. House of Life typically means the mummification house. So somebody who is a scribe but maybe I wonder if a scribe of the House of Life would be like somebody who writes a Book of the Dead. Maybe. I wonder what that would qualify. Or maybe decorates coffins with text. I wonder. Oh, I was wrong. You're right. I'm thinking of the other thing. Are you sure? I'm thinking of the game Senate. I thought that square was called the House of Life, and that was the mummification house. There's the temple library. Okay, I must be thinking of something else then. Yeah, so never mind. It's a library. So yeah, he's a scribe. That makes sense. The great criminal Parakamenef, who was formerly a magician. Obviously not no magician that we see today. Was obviously some. I don't know if it means priest in this context. I don't know what it means, but magician is how it's been translated. It is Matt. This is becoming like, granted, obviously there are people that have not probably been included on this list that have not been preserved, because like TA is not included on this list, and like there's not a lot of women, but like this is a big fucking deal for sure. Parakamenef, who was formerly a magician, the great criminal Eri, who was formerly overseer of the priests of Sekhmet, the great criminal Neb Jaffa, who was formerly a cupbearer, the great criminal Shad Mes Jeref, who was formerly the scribe of the House of Life. Total 6. It actually says total 6 in there. So that is the second list. So they don't go through each individual one. But what is very obvious here is that these 6 people were given the option to take their own lives. And we will have a debate in a little bit about, is this a worse or better punishment than being executed? And we'll talk about it in a second. But think about it for a second. So now, are we still in section 5? Yeah, okay. I guess there's a third section here somewhere. Now we have the third list of the accused. Persons brought in because of their crimes to the court before Ked en Ena, Balmer, Per Suni, Jehudi Rek Nefer, and Mer Tu Siaman. They examined them concerning their crimes. They found them guilty. They left them where they were. They took their own lives. So, sort of 2 different ways. What did the other one say? They said They left them on their own in the court. They took their own lives, no harm having been done to them. So we have two lists of these people. I lost my place. Where did I... Okay. Pentaweret. So again, this is the son, potentially. To whom that other name has been given. Which is definitely an indication that this is, at the least, this is not his name. It literally says, to whom that other name had been given. It might even be implying that other name is his royal name. So that other name had been given. He was brought in because he had been in collusion with Ta, his mother, where she had plotted the matters with the women of the harem concerning making rebellion against his lord. He was placed before the cupbearers in order to be examined. They found him guilty. They left him where he was. He took his own life. It's just a lot of people. It is a lot of people. So this is the son, and it again tells it very honestly. We can talk about this later, but I potentially feel very bad for this kid because I feel like maybe his mom didn't involve him. It does say he's been in collusion with his mother, but I'm very worried that maybe his mom didn't actually help. We do not know, unfortunately. I did say kid. Ramses the Great had about 31 years on the throne. It's unclear how young he was, but you could presume he may have been in his... Actually, wait. Scrolling down to see something that I'm going to talk about later. I was trying to see if I know how old Ramses is. Or Ramses was. Oh, I didn't write that down. I don't know. I'm assuming we've figured out how old Ramses was, but he at least ruled for 31 years. So if we assume he's maybe 20, he may have been in his 50s. So there's a high possibility his son was not a child. It was a full adult. But it is unclear based on the text. Sorry, I lost my place. What is my character doing to win the jump catch? Because I have not done anything. I've not done anything, and I've won it 3 times this stream. All right, we're gonna have a ad in just a second. So I'm gonna pause after Pentaweret. Actually, no, I got 3 more before the next slide. So the great criminal Hanut en Amun, formerly a cupbearer, he was brought in because of the crimes of the women of the harem, among who I should not be doing this while eating corn nuts. Among whom he had been, which he had heard but not reported. He was placed before the cupbearers in order to be examined. They found him guilty. They left him where he was. He took his own life. The great criminal Amenkau, formerly the deputy of the itinerant harem, he was brought in because of the crimes of the women of the harem, among whom he had been, which he had heard but not reported. He was placed before the cupbearers in order to be examined. They found him guilty. They left him where he was. He took his own life. The great criminal Pai Iri, formerly a scribe of the king's itinerant harem, he was brought in because of crimes of the women of the harem, among whom he had been, which he had heard but not reported. He was placed before the cupbearers in order to be examined. They found him guilty. They left him where he was. He took his own life. Okay, we're about to have an ad, so ask any questions that you have and I will answer. I know. I got a lie bait to allow me not to choke on a corn nut. But any questions so far? We're gonna take a 3-minute break. As we get to the 6th section of the text. I wish I looked up what Pentaware's name meant. It wasn't, I don't think it was in that article. I can't remember. The problem is this is in hieratic, so I can't even look it up to try to translate it. So he wasn't executed, he was assassinated. We talked about it at the very beginning. It just seems like it was a rough time for everyone. But we don't necessarily know if he was a bad ruler. It's kind of hard to say, to be honest. And answering Rue, your question, any records of Pharaoh's popularity? No. Like, that is unfortunately just something that is not something that's easy to sort of determine. Like, the unfortunate thing is that most of the texts we have come from pharaohs themselves, and so they are going to be bragging and they are going to be saying how great they are, and they are not necessarily going to be coming from the people themselves. And then even in the cases of people talking about pharaohs, which we have very little text of those, most often than not they're in their tombs and they're supposed to be nice to their pharaohs and stuff. So they are like, oh yeah, like, I loved really working for this pharaoh, he was great, da 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 da. And that's not necessarily unbiased, we'll say. Yes, Ramses the Great was one of the people who ruled a very long time. I don't think he ruled 80 years, but there's a potential he lived until about 80, which is really long. This guy ruled for 31, which is a pretty good rule. One of the Pepys, I can't remember if it's Pepi the First or Pepi the Second in the Middle Kingdom. He also ruled for a really long time. I think it's Pepi the Second, but he ruled for a long time because he was a baby. He was like a kid when he took the throne, and his mom was sort of his regent for a little bit. Then he lived pretty long too. But yeah, Ramses the Great is the most notable one. I'm not sure what the current estimations are, but like, it's not as young as I think people think it is. It seems like you could live into your 40s and 50s relatively easy, and then there were some people who could live into their 60s and 70s relatively easy. The big thing that I always used to say when we were giving tours is that as long as you could survive childhood illness, and as long as if you were a woman you could survive childbirth, you could live to a considerable age in Egypt. It was not as young as people think it is. It is a baby rule, but it is pretty high for Egypt. The big goal for most pharaohs is to get to 30 years on the throne. During 30 years, you do a Hebsed ceremony, you do a special ceremony, and it shows your vitality, and it shows how much longer you are going to like live and celebrate. A lot of New Kingdom pharaohs tended to celebrate their Hebsed earlier or multiple times, but 30 was the year. So that is obviously in the Old Kingdom, 30 was amazing. Because you can tell if they have to do a ceremony to kind of celebrate your reign and prove your reign, 30 is a good year, good amount of reign. Yeah, it's hard to find that sort of internal strife and such. All pharaohs thought they were immortal, but not in the sense that you're thinking. Pharaohs are gods. Pharaohs are a reincarnation of Horus. They are going to live forever in the afterlife. They don't think that they are immortal while they're living. They do have that concept of immortality, but it's in the afterlife. It's not in real life. Yeah, so it's a yes but a no. Why? Sorry, I just saw somebody's YouTube comment. Oh. Why do people have to talk about freaking typos? I don't know. Yes, it applied that immortality. So yes, because when you go to the afterlife is available to everybody, and you are allowed, like, you will live forever in that opinion. And so it applies to genuinely everyone in ancient Egypt, but the immortality of being a god only applies to the pharaoh, in that sense. Yeah, while they're alive, they don't really have that kind of understanding. They only think about the afterlife. They don't only think about the afterlife, but they definitely talk about the afterlife a lot. That's interesting, the way to think about it, Otto. All right, the 6th section. Is this the last section? Yes, this is the last section of the papyrus, of the Turin papyrus. So the 6th section has the 4th list of the accused. And this has men punished by cutting off their noses and ears because they had forsaken the good instructions given to them. The women had gone. They reached them at the place where they were. They caroused them with them and with Paez. Their crime seized them. The great criminal Pi Bess, formerly a cupbearer, this punishment was executed upon him. He was left alone, and he took his own life. The great criminal Mai, formerly a scribe of the archives. The great criminal Tai Noct, formerly an officer of the infantry. A great criminal Neni, formerly a captain of the police. And finally, we have the 5th list of the accused. A man who had joined them. He was scolded with bad and stern words. He was left alone, no harm having been done to him. The great criminal Hori, formerly a standard bearer of the infantry. So those are the list of all of the accused. Is there anything weird about this last section in the 4th and 5th list of these accused people? Anything just feeling a little weird and off? There are 2 major things that are very interesting about this list. Yes. Ivan, welcome on in. Triple raids tonight. Oh my goodness. Welcome on in. Mark, there you are. Welcome on in, Yvonne. How are you? Imhotep sent you. I'm so glad you're here.
There were tornado warnings. So
we are talking about the Harem Conspiracy tonight. But welcome on in, everyone. My name is MelissainDeNile. I am in denial in more ways than one. I'm an Egyptologist, archaeologist, and I stream Egyptology, archaeology games.
We're going to get to a solution rather like that, essentially.
As well as doing lectures, which is what we are doing today. We are talking about the Harem Conspiracy, and we are reading out the list of the accused that is on the Turin Judicial Papyrus. And I just read out one section that I'll reread for our new friends coming on in. But welcome on in. What were you doing with science and technology today? Hello, Mark. We've had 3 raids. And we're on time. It's only 9:30 and I'm not almost done, but I'm doing great. I'm doing great. This is a 23-page script, and I thought this was gonna take forever. Okay, so let me read out this last section of the list of accused. That is a lot of raids. Yeah, the first one came in very, very early. Okay, sorry, I need to go back to where I was. Okay, so this is the 6th section. I have to look at my other scripts, but yeah, it's bulleted. It's a bullet point script, but it is single spaced, which is so bad. And a lot of this is the actual translation of the papyri, so we'll move on from that. So this is the 6th section of this papyri. The papyri essentially goes through all of the list of accused. It's sort of a big summary of this court proceedings rather than like the actual court proceedings. Like it's kind of like a summary, and it's a summary of what they did and what their title is, what they did, and how they're punished. We also talked about how their names are not accurate, and they are more than likely kind of pseudonyms as a extra punishment so that they cannot get all the benefits of having their name remembered, which is part of the ancient Egyptian soul. Science versus pseudoscience. Oh, very light conversation. You should see my TikTok chat at the beginning of my stream every time. It's literally awful. It's genuinely awful. There's so many pseudoscience, especially all the pillars under the Pyramid of Giza. That's the problem I've been getting lately. So let me read out this section for y'all again so that you can hear some of the crazy things. And we're going to talk about why this section is so weird. So we've already gone through all the people who have been executed, specifically for conspiring to assassinate Ramses III with the harem women. We also went through a whole list of people who either found out about the conspiracy and then didn't report it. Some of those people were executed, especially those who were working with the big bad guy, Paibak Kamen. But then there were also people who didn't report it, but they were working in the harem. And so interestingly, those who were working in the harem, they did not get executed, but they were given the choice to commit suicide, which we are going to talk about in a little bit. Is that a better or worse punishment? We'll talk about that in a second. We're now getting to the people that are not getting big punishments because they haven't done big things. So we have the fourth list of the accused is men punished by cutting off their noses and their ears because they had forsaken the good instructions given to them. The women had gone, they reached them in the place where they were, they caroused with them and with Paez. Their crimes seized them. So the people listed specifically, the great criminal Paibes, formerly a cupbearer. This punishment was executed upon him. He was left alone and he took his own life. The great criminal Mai, formerly the scribe of the archives. The great criminal Tai Noct, formerly the officer of the infantry. The great criminal Neni, formerly the captain of the police. And then the last list of the accused is one man, the man who had joined them. He was scolded with bad and stern words. He was left alone, and no harm had been done to him. The great criminal Hori, formerly a standard bearer of the infantry. Now, I asked you guys, are there weird things with this list? And there are two, in my opinion. And one, you guys are obviously talking about why the heck is only one guy getting off with a stern warning? He's not getting executed, he's not getting asked to commit suicide, and he's not getting his nose and ears cut off, but he's just getting a stern warning. That's it. Yeah, everyone's like, I'll take the scolding. That's what I would like. That's what I would absolutely like. The other weird thing, if you guys were paying attention to the very beginning of this translation, where they went over the list of judges, you might have noticed that some of their names have been repeated in this last section. And essentially what this is that some of the people that were named as judges and people who are going to go investigate cavorted with some of the harem women and thus were punished for it. So the ones that I see specifically are the cupbearer Paibes. He was mentioned at the very beginning as one of the judges that was selected. The scribe Mai, who was the scribe of the archives. Remember we talked about this? The scribe of the archives Mai. He was also listed as a judge. And if you didn't notice, Hori, the standard bearer of the infantry who was scolded, he was also late named as a judge. So these specifically are people who were selected by the king or the court to investigate this and then cavorted with women in the harem and were punished for it. So they weren't part of the conspiracy. This is something that happened during the investigation, essentially. And they were still punished for it. But they obviously did not get as big of punishments of those who were actually involved in the conspiracy. So this shows like a much wider viewpoint of what this court proceedings was probably like, because it definitely indicates that somewhere in the middle of this court proceedings, they found out about these judges running off with some of the harem women and were like, okay, we need to add these guys to the list of the accused. Yeah, and so it's not even that they really were, like, it does appear that they sort of did a half-assed job, but they also sort of betrayed their job in a way. So that is the super fascinating part. There's one person that's listed that wasn't listed as a judge. Tai Noct and Neni, the former captain of the police. Neither of those people were listed as judges, but they are included in this list too. So the former captain of the police also did it. Yeah, it would have been extremely awkward. The interesting thing about this is that the Paibes, the cupbearer, he was we're going to talk about this a little bit, but the act of the suicide in this case is that essentially, potentially, or there's also the potential that the women tried to woo them so that they, is that what you're saying? Sorry, make someone, if some of these judges were sleeping with this woman to get off, the women were sleeping with them so that they can get off, so that they don't get punished, then yes, that is one of the options, I think. Okay, yeah, I'm just making sure that I was reading it the opposite way, but yes. So yeah, there's the potential that these women wooed the men to try and not get punished. But yeah, the interesting thing with Paibez, one of these people takes their own life, but the interesting thing is that it still seems like he also got his ears and nose cut off. So it appears to be a secondary thing that he did afterwards that is not necessarily his punishment, but is what he just did afterwards, probably because he felt very guilty. All right. We are going to analyze all the stuff that I just read out in the translation, but we're quickly going to read out the other translations of these texts, of the smaller text that talk about it, because there's a lot of still very, very much some interesting stuff featured in this. These gives us some actual details of the actual assassination rather than the court proceedings. Does this tell us anything about anti-corruption of these times? Yes, Ivan, because there is a potential that text, which is called the Turin Judicial Papyrus, there is some indication that text was hung up on a wall, presumably in a temple. That piece is not the actual court proceedings, but is this sort of summary, and again, summary of the accused and how they were punished. And there's an indication that this probably was hung up in this way to essentially tell people, don't frickin' cause treason. Don't do this, because this is what will happen. Otherwise there probably were actual other papyri that actually probably had actual court proceedings of how everything goes down. But this piece seems to very much be the summary piece. It doesn't really describe the assassination. It doesn't really do anything like this. These smaller pieces do some of that. And were probably from other texts. Though they are not nearly as big. They're much smaller. But yeah, very, very good question. I have a whole lecture on crime and punishment in ancient Egypt that I did last year. That's on my YouTube if you're interested in watching it. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of really good details. This is one of the only super detailed crimes and court proceedings and punishments that we have in the entirety of ancient Egyptian history, really. All right, so let's look at the Rollins Papyrus. So these are much more short. These are shorter. These are much more specific. And they're not just these long lists of all the conspirators. So let's look at the translation of this text. Again, it's 5 lines. So it's pretty short. So, this is the translation. It happened because writings were made for enchanting, for banishing, for confusing, because of some god were made into wax, and some men also. And furthermore, the enfeebling of the limbs of men, which writings were placed in the hands of Paibak Kamen. Remember, he's the big conspirator. That Ray had not allowed that his act as chief of the chamber and of the other capital offenders, saying, quote, let them come close, end quote, and one let them come close. This sounds very confusing. We'll break it down in just a second. And when he caused the doers of crime to enter, he, that Ray had not allowed that he grow up, acted along with them. He was examined, and face was found in every offense and every crime, which his heart has conceived to do them. There was the fact in those crimes. He had committed them in full together with the other capital offenders of his kind. Offenses worthy of death were these, and the full abomination for the country was this which he had done. And when he understood that those offenses which he had done were worthy of death, he brought death to himself. Now, this is a very fascinating text. It has that, unfortunately, like old world translation, so we just gotta decipher some of the line by line. We definitely think there's sections missing. We think that this piece may have also been attached to Papyrus Lee. But the very distinct difference between this text and the Papyrus Turin is it's written as a narrative. And it's written about an action that has to do with the Great Conspiracy. Now, there is no name of the accused that's actually here. It may have never been stated, but there's no actual name of sort of the accused person that we're talking about in this moment. Because of the way the grammar is used in this example, it is probably not referring to the action of a particular person, but as a general description of the causes leading up to the actual assassination. If you remember from the very beginning, it says, "It happened because writings were made for enchanting, for banishing, for confusing, because some god was made into wax, and some men." So there's this very interesting article that talks about, was magic used in the Harem Conspiracy? And that is where I'm getting all this information from. It is a free article. I found it online. It is a little dense because it does go through a lot of linguistic stuff and like interpreting different mentions in this text. But it breaks it down very nicely. And it goes through both Rollins and Lee, the Lee Papyrus, which is where I found these translations. So although the text at the very beginning of the section does imply that some sort of magic was being used, the potential of maybe making a wax figure of a person, sort of like a voodoo doll, not exactly like a voodoo doll, but very similar. It implies that they used magic to deceive the guards by bewitching them or weakening them. If you also heard that says, enfeebling the limbs of men. So potentially weakening like guards. And so the text is implying that they hired this magician or something to make a wax figurine to sort of act as this medium for this ritual exercise. But it appears that they're also using this as a figure of speech and that they are, quote, making people into wax. And that is sort of implying, well, it also, I know in some ways you could interpret it as, oh, you're making somebody weaker. You're making somebody into wax. The other way they could see it is that you are trying to influence a person. Wax takes your impression. You are trying to influence a person, to trying to convince a person to do something. They can be molded and they can be changed. And so that is another way that this is getting interpreted, that it's not a physical making of this magical figurine of wax, and that it's just trying to influence people to get closer to the king to then assassinate him, essentially. They did have drugs. They did. They didn't call them drugs. They didn't understand them as drugs, but yes. Hello, Slater. Welcome on in. All right. Before I go into deeper on this one, because it actually relates to Papyrus Lee, we will read the translation for Papyrus Lee. We'll talk about both of those in conjunction because they talk about similar things. So, he took an oath of the Lord, life, prosperity, and health, for substantiating every trustworthiness by swearing at every time, saying, quote, "I did not give a piece of writing to any person, I of the office in which I was, or to any person of the country," end quote. Paibak Kamen, who was formerly the overseer of cattle, said to him, quote, "Give to me a piece of writing for giving me power and authority," end quote. He gave him a piece of official paper of Usur Ma'at Re Meri Amun, Lord, life, prosperity, and health. This is the throne name of Ramses III, the great god, his lord. No, sorry, I didn't mean that. They have something called Heka, which is sort of magic it's sometimes tied with like hallucinogens like Blue Lotus, but it's not always tied. Magic is both medicine, magic is religion, magic is a lot of different things. It is not sort of how we see magic today. If that makes sense. It's a little confusing. There's a lot of weird things going on with that. All right. And it happened because of the feast of the arrival of the god and the excitement of the people that he reached the harem side of that other very high place. It happened because the people were made into wax, and because of the writings of demand that one allowed, that they were taken in the charge of the commissioner Ayed Rem, and while members of one group banished, the others deceived the few conspirators, taken led the others on. When one examined him, about them, one found fact in every offense and every crime, which his heart had conceived to do them, there was the fact in those crimes. He had committed them in full together with the other great criminals of his like, the abomination of every god and every goddess. And one applied to him the punishments worthy of death, which the god said, do them to him. Now, unfortunately, we go over to this piece, which is a little broken up at the top. So we have ... among their ... on the basket. He went ... with his feeble hand. That's sort of the gist we have of just the very top. Then we have, when the officials examined him, about them one found fact in every offense and every crime, which his heart had conceived to do them, there was fact in them. He had committed them in full together with the other great criminals of his like, the abomination of every god and every goddess, and the... Wait, did I just repeat that? I don't know if that actually repeats, but maybe it does. And the offenses they were worthy of death, and the abomination of the country was what he had done. And when he understood that those offenses which he had done were worthy of death, he brought death to himself. When the officials who were in charge of him learned, quote, he killed himself, end quote, ... Ray entirely that which the writings of the divine word say, do it to him. No problem, Leo. All this will get posted on my YouTube soon, but obviously it'll be on Twitch for the next 2 weeks or so. But thank you for stopping in. Have a great rest of your night. Okay. So now let's look at both of these and decipher it a little bit. We have a slightly different text here. It definitely goes along that same narrative language rather than that formal legal document. You can easily see why people think that these were attached together, because they have a very similar cadence and a very similar kind of language. This one starts with an oath, which typically is a phrase that is only used in legal contexts. So this might be like a confession. This might be sort of that. But again, the name of the culprit in this case is not named. We actually can deduce who this might be about. So the scholar who did this research was able to figure out that this more than likely is one of the people named Pi-Eri, son of Ruma, because this person is both listed as working with official documents, and he was executed rather than being forced to commit suicide. And he also was overseer of the treasury. So they mention it. They don't mention his name, but they mention some of the titles, and they mention one of his punishments. And so we can sort of deduce, based on the list of the Turin Papyrus, who this might be about. So in this case, what we have sort of found out is that the main conspirator, Pi Bakamen, was not in this case asking for a magical charm, but he was asking for a piece of writing that would give status to its possessor and impress people, probably as some sort of piece of paper that would allow him to get past the guards to go to the king. He's looking for some sort of piece of writing that he would show to a guard, and a guard would let him pass. This is the document that also gives us the closest indication as to where and when the actual conspiracy takes place. So as you saw, like the arrival of the god, who in this case is Amun, that is again the beautiful festival of the valley. And then we also assume that it takes place in the Theban area because of that festival. And then we actually get down to deeper specifics because of this text. So the literal translation says the inner side or the inside of the building, in which case is referring to a side door of a building which opens towards the harem. Now, the building is only described as, quote, that other very high place. Because this is like so deep into linguistics that like it just kind of boggles my mind. Because it is labeled as other, it implies that there are two equal structures. And so we can jump to the conclusion that it is the high gate of Medinat Habu, which I'll show you a picture of again. Somewhere here. So here is our high pylon, our high gate of Medinat Habu. And remember, the harem is right here. The harem is very, very close. It is attached. You can see there's several doors. So here is the high gate here on the right. And there are several doors that go straight into the temple that would have attached to this harem, this palace. So because it's labeled as other, we can imply that it's one of these high gates of Medinat Habu. Now, we only have, go back. If this is south, yeah, so we only have the eastern gate, which is this, the eastern pylon, that now stands. But we do also have the western pylon, also on this section. Because they use a specific word, they use the word keet, and it implies the less conspicuous of the two things, which is so specific and so interesting that somebody can like sort of deduce that. And we know that this eastern gate is actually the most prominent, so I'm actually backing back what I said, is that it's probably this west gate. What we know is that the western gate actually appears to have had a suite of rooms on the upper floors. Yeah, and there's the other gate. So we know that these gates had other rooms, which you can see in these little windows up here. So these are the windows of the eastern gate, but we would be looking at the western gate here. And this is possibly a place where the king could enjoy some company away from other people and away from the actual harem. So there's actual archaeological evidence that there is some sort of side door. So somewhere over here, presumably this is probably the entire harem, probably this whole area. There appears that there is there is actual archaeological evidence that there is a side door that is almost directly opposite a door on the inner enclosure wall. So somewhere in this area. And this is how scholars have sort of concluded where the assassination actually took place. Make sure I'm at the same thing. Okay. We don't know specifically what was going on. All we know from TA is that she wanted her son to be on the throne. We don't really know anything else about her. We don't know if she was mad that her husband took other lover. Like, we don't know any of that. We just know that she wanted, you're good. She just wanted her son to be the crown prince and to be on the throne. So probably the eastern gate over here. And there appears to be archaeological evidence of some sort of doorway over here. Or maybe it's here. I actually don't know. It might be here. I'm wondering if this is it. So they only refer to it as the high place. So it would actually be sort of up here. I'm wondering if it is, go back. So see how this on the eastern gate, or yeah, the eastern gate, there are windows up here? There are chambers up here. So I'm wondering if this is the considered, yeah, the window of appearances. I'm wondering if this, so you can see here's the eastern gate. I'm wondering if this is considered the western gate and these are the doors, or this door or something like that. We know he had other sons, but the other thing is she is also not the great royal wife, so her son was never in the succession line. Her son is low on the succession line for sure. Ramses has, all pharaohs had children with multiple wives. This is not an uncommon thing though. Yeah, I'm thinking that maybe this is what they're talking about as the western gate, because it is smaller. When you look at this picture, you can see that it's smaller, but there doesn't seem to be anything back here, so I think it's actually here. The unfortunate thing is that the harem didn't get, it kind of got destroyed when it was being excavated, so it doesn't have a lot with doesn't have a lot of good archaeological evidence. But it appears, they keep referring to it as the high place, so it definitely appears into the top. No, they always had multiple wives. They would have a great royal wife, and that is, their children usually came from there, but not always. This is a very good question, Rue, and honestly, I don't know the answer. Rue's asking, was a wife chosen as a great royal wife after she had a son, or could she be a great royal wife without a son? I don't know if we know that, because I don't know exactly sometimes the timeline. The unfortunate thing that's clouding my judgment on this is that I read a book where, I read a fiction book which talked about how he would select a great royal wife when he became pharaoh. That, like, if he married before he became pharaoh, if he was a son, like the crown prince, that he could select a great royal wife at any time. But that's a fictional book, so I don't know what research she has to back that up. But it appears that he potentially anyone could select their great royal wife. Unclear, unfortunately. I don't know if they would only select them after they had a son. I don't know. Mostly because we just don't have as much evidence on, like, a timeline of, like, when would a prince get married? Would a prince get married before he took the throne, after he took the throne? How many wives would you take? Something. Yeah, you would think that his great royal wife would be assigned. More than likely, your great royal wife is actually your sibling, like, for the most part, because there are pharaohs who married non-royal people, like, or not siblings, not within the actual family. I doubt they'd be elevated until they had a son, since some didn't have sons. That is a good point, Star. Yeah, Hatshepsut was not Thutmosis II's great royal wife. Did he have a great royal wife? I don't know. It unfortunately relies on TA was great royal wife. Okay, that's a good example, actually. That Hatshepsut was TA was great royal wife and Hatshepsut was great royal wife. Okay. I thought you were like capitalization and then not capitalization. But yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good example that it might be that they don't get selected until after they have a son. Because Hatshepsut never had a son, and she appears to have not have been a great royal wife to her husband, but that another woman was. Is that what you're saying? No. Okay, you're saying she is. Okay, sorry. I'm missing everything. I doubt they'd be elevated until they had a son, since some didn't have sons. So Hatshepsut was a great royal wife, but she never had a son, is what we're saying. Yeah, Nefertiti we sort of know is not Tut's wife, or Tut's mom. She only had daughters that we know of. Yeah, Nefertiti. That is true. Yeah, Nefertiti is great royal wife, but she had no sons. And I would probably argue, I feel like that's probably the best chance we have of, she may have been labeled as great royal wife. I was about to say that Nefertiti was married to Akhenaten before he became king. And I think, I don't doubt we could probably find some textual evidence that she's labeled great royal wife before even any of the children are born. Not 100% sure on that, but I feel like she may have been given that title before any of the kids are born. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's a very interesting, and also remember, this is also not consistent over 5,000 years of time. We're exclusively almost talking about New Kingdom at this point. Yeah, Akhenaten was a priest. His older brother was the crown prince, and he was a priest. Oh, Merit Aten was born before he came to the throne? I didn't know that one. It might just be the person in his favor. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, this text tells us about these fake papers. This text tells us about the exact location of where the assassination took place. And then the big thing is that this tells us about what the fake papers were used for. So it tells us that the fake papers were probably used to gain entry, and that the guards probably thought they were legit, and they would let this person or people in to go see the king. They do use a word called teche to indicate that they may have actually been escorted by the guards. Like, they show this piece of paper and the guards escort them to the king. They also name a person in which the conspirators entered the building as Idrem, a foreigner who was probably a personal servant of the king. His name might be derived from the name of a historic city in Palestine, which has the same name, which is why we think he might be a foreigner. But it also might be an ethnic designation rather than his actual name. It might just be labeling him as somebody from this city. So it appears that this is sort of part of an original description of the crime, but is now unfortunately lost. As you can see, there's a couple lines that get cut off here when somebody cut this papyrus. And so this appears to be kind of the closest we have to the actual description of the crime. Sorry. No, so by the time of the Ptolemaic period, I don't think they are using Great Royal Wife anymore, because they are not even Egyptian pharaohs. But she did not have a royal husband. The Ptolemaic period gets really weird because they just keep ousting each other and then bringing them back in, and they have like 3 rulers at the same time a lot of the time, and usually it's like mother, father, and daughter, or mother, father, and son, or mother, son, and daughter, and they're married, and it's very complicated, the Ptolemaic period. TA was also immediately Great Royal Wife. Yeah, I would definitely say that TA makes sense, because she's of course not probably not related to Amenhotep III specifically. Hi, Prime Operative. Like, she was chosen by him, more than likely. Yeah, the Ptolemaic pharaoh period is so weird. It's so strange. Sometimes it's 3 siblings, but 2 of them are married. And that's the 3 rulers. It's very weird. Yeah, or by his mother. But definitely chosen, I think, much more than others. So yeah, so this piece is, honestly, Papyrus Lee is probably my favorite. It's so fascinating and interesting. Now, Papyrus Varzi is going to sound very different because, again, remember, this one only in 2001 was suggested to be related to the Harem Conspiracy, so it doesn't sound like it actually is, but I will tell you the scholars' arguments afterwards. So the translation says, He did what was necessary to wipe out the branding marks. He seized the scribe's palette, and with his own hand, he made a sign rouge, in which he drew a sign Ewan, ... because again, it's very fragmented. What you have branded are all the small cattle which belong to me with this mark. That means durable is Heliopolis. Example of the drawing of branding marks, which I think is this right here. The name that Pharaoh had given him, life, strength, and health, his master, life, strength, and health, whereas the one he had before was the name of a free man's servant. Now, doesn't sound like it's coming from the Harem Conspiracy at all, but I digress. The first 3 lines here refer to a complaint. It also might be the minute of like a lawsuit that's lodged by like a landowner whose livestock has been stolen, and then they've been branded with different signs from the original estate. It doesn't appear to have anything to do with the Harem Conspiracy, but again, mainly it was argued because of some of the language that is found, like the specific grammar and the specific wording that is found in other papyri that relate to it. So it's more than likely that this might have been maybe attached to some of the other papyri, or were part of a much larger legal document that included a little bit about the Harem Conspiracy or other crimes. It definitely essentially dates to this time period, and it might have been part of like a much larger court proceedings that also included the Harem Conspiracy. So the event that is talking about it does not really talk about it, but there's similarities in the language and the grammar and how it is written that it appears it might have been related in some sort of way. Yeah, it was a crime. Absolutely. Taking cattle and putting other brands on them. Very bad. Yes, absolutely. So again, we think that we've looked at 5 papyri. There are 5 essentially of papyri that are talking about it. That are talking about the Harem Conspiracy. One of them I don't have a translation for or even a photo of. The big one, which is the Turin Papyrus, is definitely a summary document. There definitely implies that there were multiples, that the Papyrus Lee and the Papyrus Rollins may have been more of like, it's sort of, because it's written as like a narrative and it's almost written like a confession or like an investigation, that there would be versions of that. But it is also possible that all of these things are copied. One of the things I was talking about at the very, very beginning of the lecture is that the Turin Judicial Papyrus has not been reused, which is very uncommon. A lot of papyri, they are found with a recto and a verso, the front and the back. And often they are completely different. They are not related. And sometimes you can tell linguistically, they come from completely different time periods. That somebody is essentially going to reuse the very fancy papyrus for something else. And this papyrus was not touched, does not have anything on the back. And so that is incredibly rare and probably shows how lucky we are to have this piece. And how lucky it is to have been preserved. We also think that it was cut in half though. And we can't tell if it was cut in half during antiquity or during modern times to possibly be split and sold separately. But there was something else, like there was more. Yeah, no treasure map on the back. No treasure of Ramses III. If we take a little lemon juice and breathe on it a bit. None of that. All right. So, what the heck happened after this assassination? How did this affect the rest of the 20th dynasty and the rest of the New Kingdom? So fragile. Fragile. I mean, they may have. Who knows? Most ways that the easiest part about keeping papyrus is you frame it. Like a lot of them are framed, you can obviously see, because it's the easiest way to keep it flat and stable. So I know some of this stuff actually kind of does describe the assassination, but we also can break some of it down a little bit more. So the funny thing about this entire conspiracy is that only half of it is completed. Ramses III is murdered. He is assassinated. But they are not able to put Pentawere on the throne or as the crown prince. They are not able to do that. They said instead, Ramses IV, who you see here, he takes the throne as he was supposed to, as his father had essentially chosen him to. And we don't know really what sort of occurs within this to make this happen, but it's implied very heavily that the other members of the royal family and the other members of the royal court and officials were still loyal to Ramses IV and were able to essentially maneuver the conspirators from that second half of the conspiracy. Scooby, I just loved Egypt since I was a really little kid. I got a couple different books. I watched The Prince of Egypt, and bang, there it is, and I just wanted to keep learning about it. Absolutely. We're talking about the Harem Conspiracy. We're wrapping up. What page are we on? 19 out of 23. We're almost there. So what we also mentioned earlier was we have the 12 judges that are selected by the new pharaoh to investigate and judge this case. And let's just recap all the people, what actually happens to these conspirators. So there are 22 people that are executed, and they ranged from harem officials to scribes to army officials. And then 11 were able to take their own lives. And I want to think about this. Actually, Prime Operative, this is exactly what we're going to talk about right now, is that some people in Western societies might consider suicide a lighter punishment. Some might consider it a worse punishment than execution. And y'all can think about all the options for why that would be bad in our modern society. But I want you guys to think about the ancient Egyptians and their concept of the afterlife and what happens after death. And then try to think, okay, is this a lighter punishment or is this a harsher punishment for people? So, unfortunately, in general, we don't know a lot about ancient Egyptian suicide. We don't know 100% if it is lighter or harsher. But, I originally saw this as something that is less severe when I'm thinking about the ancient Egyptian afterlife, in which you need your body to be in perfect shape. You need your body to look like you so that your spirit, the part of your soul, can go and find you in the afterlife. Because we don't exactly know what execution was like in Egypt, I feel like that is what influences this. Because execution potentially could be like cutting off your head or taking a spear and leaning on it, like could be something like that. There's also the potential of burning somebody. If you think about that option especially, that makes suicide much more lighter because again, you need your body to be in perfect condition to go to the afterlife. If your body does not exist, if your body gets cremated, no afterlife, not even a choice. You don't even get to go into the afterlife to then get judged if you can go into the further afterlife. You don't even get that option because you have been burned. And that's a great point, Otto. Yeah, you get a little bit more agency. You're allowed to sort of do it yourself. You don't have to be killed in front of other people. Definitely possible. And so some people have actually argued that this is harsher because that these criminals are too bad to even be touched by executioners. And that this punishment does also carry the extra psychological dimension, forcing these convicts to essentially condemn themselves, becoming the executioners of themselves. So there's also that option. I don't think we have any indication, Prime, that would have been an option. They definitely were afraid of crocodiles and hippos, but I don't think they would have done something that sounds crazy. The potential is that you wouldn't be killed. It's not like obviously exact, but the potential is that you could get out of there just injured, severely injured. Like the crocodile is not going to eat you, sort of. But yeah, I think that's not exact enough. That's not making sure it's actually going to happen, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely a Hollywood version. Yeah, I would say so. Sharks with laser beams on their heads. So there's this other option of it being actually much harsher because it puts all of that task onto you, and that you're not deserving for even executioners to touch you. Okay, sorry. My nose is all clogged up. So a recent article that talks about this has sort of concluded that this is probably a lighter punishment in the case of this specific event, mainly because the text for the suicide convictions is almost identical in wording to the non-lethal convictions, like the one person who was verbally berated. And also if you think about it, it went from execution, suicide, people with their noses and ears cut off, and then verbally. It went from bad to okay. It went from the worst type of punishment to an okay punishment. So I think it is seen sort of as a middle ground between one being sentenced to death and then one getting like their ear or nose cut off. So we obviously talked about the non-lethal punishments. I love the guy Hori, who gets verbally reprimanded. But one thing you will notice that is missing from this text is the punishment of Queen Ta. Her name is mentioned. Her name is mentioned quite a few times. There are other women that are mentioned, although not by name. The 6 women are mentioned as being executed, but Ta is not mentioned. She is not included in that section. She does not seem to be included because, again, it says they are women. What is it? Women married to the men of the gate of the harem. It doesn't imply Ta would be included in that group. And so we don't know what happens to Queen Ta. We presume she has to be punished. But honestly, she's not included in this. I don't think she gets off scot-free, but I feel like she may have. I don't know. I don't know why she's not included. She just disappears. And again, Ta is probably not her real name because I don't think we have any other writings of her name except for this papyrus. I don't think she appears. Even the picture I showed you is an unnamed queen from the time of Ramses III. Like, she just doesn't exist outside of this papyrus. Genuinely. She does not exist out of this one papyrus. Who knows? I think banishment is definitely a possibility. I do think execution of women is a possibility, but would their families face punishment as well? I don't know. One thing that's interesting is that one person who's their sister, who works in the harem or is in the harem of some sort, the sister, the brother of this girl gets in trouble. It's unclear if she gets in trouble, if she's included in one of those 6 women. But it's very unclear. It's very unclear. Again, you would think that they'd get included, but who knows, honestly. All right, we're going to have an ad in just a second, but I timed this perfectly. Yes, we can assume their status would have been greatly impacted, especially if everybody knew that they were involved. There is absolutely a possibility of that. And the biggest possibility is that, like, Ta, I don't know, she just disappears. She just disappears out of here. But yeah, you would assume that people would know. If your husband stops showing up, oh, what happened to your husband? Oh, he got executed by the king. Like, I'm sure things happened. And you lose that income. These guys all probably had families and had their jobs, but they don't have a job anymore. So something probably happens. Yeah, another lovely misinformation from the mummy. We'll actually talk about that in just a brief second. Getting buried with the dead king. But we have an ad in a second. So, any questions you want to ask so far? We're wrapping up. We don't have much left to talk about. We just got to talk about mummies. That's what we got to talk about for the last part. Ivan, thank you so much for the 200 biddies. Thank you so much. Oh, God. I don't have any tissues. I only have napkins. Oh, God. Oh, congested. I'm talking too much. I'm almost curious that it got recorded. Well, so this is not about Akhenaten. Just so you know, Baha. I hope you know that. This is about Ramses the Third. Yeah, Otto, you have so much shorter ads than everybody else. Yeah, this is definitely a little bit. Oh, okay. I have 3-minute ads set up. But Otto, isn't that because you're not in the US? I think it's set up that differently for you guys. To be honest, Mark, I answered this question earlier. We really only know 100% about this one. We have random sort of smatterings in more contemporary text, like Manetho and Herodotus, where they sort of are just like, oh yeah, and he was assassinated. Oh yeah, and he was killed. But we really don't have a lot of big indications that they actually were. It's really just Ramses III. We do have indications of more coups, but not murders. Yeah. It's honestly, it's just probably not preserved. Like, I'm sure we do, but it's just not really preserved, really. We have the records of the pharaohs who probably, were killed in battle, but beyond that, actually, I will say, most of that actually comes from their mummy, not from, text, I guess. Alrighty. That is done. Alright, the last thing, I want to just kind of point out about the text is that we get this very interesting mixture of who gets what punishment based on what they did in the scheme. So the article that I've been referencing this whole time is called Convicting Great Criminals, A New Look at Punishments in the Turin Judicial Papyrus. It's a really great article. The author made a chart on showing how many people got what punishment depending on how involved they were. I realized I was supposed to put that in this PowerPoint and I missed it, so I apologize. I might be able to find it. Let me see. Is this the article? Nope, that is not. Oh, here it is. Convicting Great Criminals. Let's see. Yeah, so we got execution. They caused his punishment to befall him. 22, forced suicide. They left him in his place and he killed himself. 11. And we have people to whom was done punishment by severing noses and ears. We have 4. And then the one who is verbally reprimanded. And then this is the chart that I was looking at, which is, oh god, no. Can you, there you go. So you have the people who are actively involved in the plot to overthrow the pharaoh. You have people who are aware of the plot but not actively involved. Essentially, these are the failed to report it people. And then you have the judges at the trial but on overly friendly terms with the accused, cavorting in some sort of way. Prime operative, no, typically they just have the title Great Royal Wife, because not all queens get their name in a cartouche. Mostly it's just kings. Some queens do, but not all. So typically it would just be, they have literally the title Great Royal Wife, which would be where Hemet something? I don't know what royal would be. Hemet is wife and great is where something. So what we can see is that we have 14 people who are actively involved in the plot, 7 who were executed, and 7 who were made to commit suicide. We have 12 people who are aware of this plot but not actively involved, and everyone from that 12 either gets executed or forced suicide. 9 people get executed and only 3 people get forced suicide. But what is so aware is that if you were aware of the plot and not reporting it, that is an extremely large punishable offense for in the ancient Egyptian. Hem Nesut Weret. Yeah, Hemet Nesu Weret. So Hemet is wife, Nesut is queen, is wife of king, is the king but female, so queen, Weret. You have to add the T, so it's feminine. So great royal wife. Great queen wife, essentially, is what it means. Literally. And then again, you have these 5 judges, one of whom does something so bad that he is forced to commit suicide, but most of them get mutilation, and then one gets that verbal warning. But again, these are judges. These are judges that were mentioned in the text. And I think this is really interesting that no one in this text is said to be the actual murderer of Ramses III. No, this is not, think of et tu Brute. Nobody is labeled here as specifically somebody who stabbed Ramses III. These are all just people who, again, vaguely are involved in this plot to overthrow him. But somehow they either didn't figure out who actually murdered him, or they just care about the plot in general rather than the specific murder. It is just everybody's involved in the plot. It doesn't matter if you actually murdered him. It matters if you are all involved, which is really interesting to think about. Yeah, exactly. All right. The last thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to look at 2 mummies. We are mainly going to look at Ramses III's mummy, who has given us a lot of indications of how he died. As you can tell, when we listen to the text says nothing. The text says nothing about actually how he died. Everything that we know about how he died comes from his mummy. Does not come from the actual text itself. So, here we have our mummy of Ramses III, and I know we just talked about him in our recent discussion streams, but he was found in the DB 320 royal cache. This was a cache where over 50 individuals, mostly pharaohs and royal family members from the 17th to 21st dynasties, were later placed as sort of a reburial situation after their tombs had been severely looted. Yeah, he's got a big frown. He's got a pretty big mouth. I'm wondering if his mouth is sort of cut like that, or if, I don't know. He's got a big frown. Yeah, he's got a little cow blanket. It's very unique. I haven't really seen anything sort of like that he's just got. It's like a little cow with the little snouts. So after his mummy was found, archaeologists thought that they kind of originally thought it was like, I thought that he didn't have any wounds. They didn't see really anything obvious on how he may have died. And so even though at this point when they discovered his they discovered DB320 in what, 1880s or so. A lot of those papyri were found were in the museums already by the 1840s. So they had already begun translating and sort of understanding that there was this harem conspiracy. We can presume that Ramses III is dead. Something has occurred. They're kind of putting everything two and two together around the same time, in the late 1800s. But when they're looking at his body, they're not seeing anything super obvious. And so they presumed at first that it was like poison or snake venom was thought to be in charge of his death. And that is especially because of the amount of people labeled as cupbearers in the text that were charged. And so, and there was apparently one conspirator, although I'm not sure where. I don't know if it's maybe how his name is translated, but called Snake or Lord of the Snakes. Maybe that's what that one person's name was. Wait, let me go back to that. The snake demon. That's it. Yeah. That Pa-in Uik is the snake demon. They thought, okay, maybe it has to do with snake venom. Maybe that's why he's named that way. So they would presume a lot of this stuff. It doesn't look that different, but also this black and white photo is from the 1800s. And I don't know when this color photo is from, but it's from much more recently. I don't think it looks, to me, it does not look that different, minus this eye, but I don't think it looks that different to me. Minus the cow blanket, which obviously has been placed over him now. But yeah, so we don't know. It could be poison. We don't really know. That is what they said at first. But when the mummy went under CT scans in 2011, a lot of his injuries were revealed. So there are major injuries on his neck, and there's also one on his foot, which you see here on the left. They are kind of, it just depends on how they're mummified, but yes, they would be really fragile because the eyes would have dried up and sucked it up, and so there would actually be a gap. You can see here on his eyes that it's been packed with stuff. But yeah, it actually does look like his eyelids have been damaged. Especially his right one. But yeah, it's because it's a solid, it's like a thin layer of skin that's sitting on top of a bone that doesn't have anything to support it, like the eyeball. Almost, Otto. So what they essentially figured out is that the reason there are all of these bandages, when you look at his neck, that his neck was very, very tightly bandaged by the mummification priests, is that essentially we looked at his CT scan and we found very large, deep knife wound along his neck. It went across his throat, and as you can see, it almost reached his spine. So here's essentially his spinal cord, his spinal bones in the very front, and it almost reached it at that point. It severed his trachea, his esophagus, and various large blood vessels that are all kind of here in the neck area. And modern Egyptologists, along with consulting with some bioarchaeologists and forensic anthropologists, concluded that this would have been rapidly fatal, mainly due just to blood loss, which further reinforced the fact that he probably did not survive, even though that was a thought. At the very beginning, they thought maybe that he had survived for a couple days and then passed. Additionally, as you see here in his foot region, there is his big toe was chopped off by possibly like a heavy axe. So see this line? This is the line. of the bone that is missing. So something very sharp chopped off his big toe, presumably maybe an axe, who knows. And there's no signs that the bone healed, which tells us that this injury probably happened shortly before his death. And what we know is that the embalmers tried to quote unquote fix him by both wrapping, again, his neck very, very tightly, and then also placing a fake little big toe here in his, like this whole part is a fake big toe made out of linen, to make a full toe so that he looks complete, to the gods and to his thing. Yeah, so here is the star is where each of these things are, and here is his spine. So it pretty much hit his spine. And then there's also these two little things, which are small little amulets that have been placed around his foot, to make his foot heal. No, they're not going to notice the fake toe. No, why would they? So yeah, so this mummy, he obviously was, like, this is giving us, like, the biggest indication of actually how he was murdered. Surprisingly, again, like, this is, again, pure speculation. Let's look at the difference between, like, the death of Caesar. Caesar gets stabbed, like, by a ton of guys in the same way. This looks like maybe a two-man job. Like, this does not look like a bunch of people all coming in and kind of ambushing him to, like, make sure he's dead. This looks like somebody, like, I don't know about the toe thing. I don't know if like, I feel like there's also a possibility that maybe the toe thing is chopping off his toe and showing, like, Queen TA that he's dead or something. Like, I don't know if it's, like, proof or something like that. But, yeah, it's, like... Yeah, I literally I feel like maybe that is also an option of, like, it's not necessarily a, like, I chopped you to distract you and then the other guy came around and did this. Like, it's very interesting. I think it would be crazy, but I feel like it's not impossible that it could be bring me your big toe so that I know it's done. Or bring me something to tell me that it is done. So Unibuni, yes. This assassination was not the thing that made this period decline. We talked about at the very, very beginning that this is during what is called the late Bronze Age collapse, when there is just a very widespread societal collapse, mainly doing possibly with the Sea Peoples. Ramses III defeated the Sea Peoples in his 8th year of his reign, so this is still a little bit after that point. But there was also the first reported strike in recorded history. The first strike happens in the 29th year of his reign. He dies in the 31st year of his reign. There also appears to have been some sort of natural disaster that occurred around this time that stunted crop growth around the globe. Possibly a volcanic eruption that sort of like clouded everything so that the crops didn't grow as much. This was sort of like, it makes sense that it kind of gets to this point, as to top it all off, that the end of the 19th dynasty earlier had ended with a civil war of some sort. And so Set Nakht, Ramses III's father, is not related at all to the 19th dynasty pharaohs. He is just the person who ends up on top. And so the big thing here is that it's a lot of factors. And I think truly some of the biggest downfalls of the Ramesside period is just the length of Ramses II's reign. So this is not this one. The one that is suspected is called Hekla 3. I don't know where that volcano is. I forgot to look it up. But it's called Hekla 3 is what we think this eruption was. I don't know if is Hekla in Iceland, Otto? Do you know that off the top of your head? Because that'd be really cool if you did. But yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so in Iceland. Okay, that's very cool. So yeah, so there's a volcano obviously called Hekla, and so there's an eruption called Hekla 3 that might have been around that same time that may have affected crop growth. So this whole period is just like, they're just running down ever since Ramses the Great had lived so long that his sons all kept dying off without him, and he probably got a dud son. No, he didn't get a dud son, but like, yeah, a lot of different stuff. I'm not sure if it's the makeup strike. I actually don't know a lot about it, but I know that it is from this time period. But I think it's Deir el-Medina people striking, which would not necessarily be like makeup artists or stuff like that. Oh, 10,000 BC? Oh no, it's not that one. I have it in my notes. Or I have I don't know if I don't think they have fully confirmed the Tekla 3. Also, I'm not sure if 3 means the third eruption of it that we know about. Where did I have that? Supposedly this one erupted... Oh, okay, 1000 BC. Okay, so I had 1160 to 1140, so very close to it. Oh yes, tomb builders. Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about, Baha, but I'm blanking on what that comes from. But yes, it's Deir el-Medina, like tomb builders, who are striking for not receiving rations. Is all during this guy's reign. And so there's just a lot like bringing this reign down, truly. But yeah, the one you're saying, it reminds me of something else. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is another mummy. And we did, again, talk about this in one of our discussion streams, but I know I have to mention it because it gets so much associated with the Harem Conspiracy, even though, unfortunately, it probably has nothing to do with the Harem Conspiracy. So, the other mummy we're going to look at is Unknown Man E, who people have talked about the possibility of being Pentawere, the prince who, again, was trying to get put on the throne, or his mom was trying to get him to put on the throne. That's okay, Otto. And this mummy, for a very, very long time, has almost only been analyzed based on his pained expression, the constricted abdominal muscles, and the odd mummification of a like not normal embalming and a ritually unclean sheepskin that he was buried in. He's only really been analyzed by these factors, which has led people to believe that he is Pentawere. All of those things put together have led scholars to say that he was buried alive. And most of the conclusions center on, why would somebody be buried alive? Oh, they must be a convict or a criminal who is deserving of that same treatment. And so then people have jumped to the conclusion that he is Pentawere, who essentially is one of the only named convicts and criminals that we have. Here's some of the problems with this. Which, if you want to see more, I actually have the whole discussion stream for our DB320 out on my YouTube now. I finally edited all of those, so you can go into a little bit more detail when we were looking at it specifically, but I kind of summarized this. So yes, he is very thin. A lot of this has to do with the mummification, specifically, because they have to dry your body out, so no matter what, you're going to look skinnier than you actually are, because they're trying to dry out all of it. So Pentawere, the person that we're talking about, was one of these people who is charged in this Harem Conspiracy. That's the topic that we're talking about today, which essentially is the assassination of Ramses III. And Pentawere specifically is a son of Ramses III, whose mother, Ta, is the instigator of pretty much this entire conspiracy because she wanted to put him on the throne. Pentawere is probably not his actual name. It is probably a fake name that they gave him for these documents, because the ancient Egyptians saw that a name is a part of an ancient Egyptian soul, and so as an extra punishment, they're going to give them fake names, rude names more often than not. So, because of all of these assumptions on this mummy being a convict and being a criminal, scholars have jumped the bridge saying, well, who's the biggest convict and criminal that we know? Pentawere. So let's talk about why this is probably not Pentawere. we have done DNA testing. So this, sorry, I'll correct myself. Let's talk about one factor that might make him Pentaware. There was a DNA test between the mummy of Ramses III and unknown man E because of this theory. It does show that they share an identical Y chromosome STR, or short tandem repeat haplotypes, and this is consistent with a first degree that says material. I was about to say it probably meant to be maternal, but it can't be maternal. Relationship, that a first degree relationship. Now, the scholars who then did this test concluded this is Pentaware. But again, they based that entirely on the idea of his unique mummification was a result of his punishment, and not on the fact that Ramses III has several recorded sons. No, his nose is not cut off. Yes, there is a flake of his skin that is coming off, but his nose is still intact. And if you remember correctly, Pentaware on the list did not get his nose cut off. He was asked to commit suicide. He did not get his nose and ears cut off. He committed suicide, as per the text. So, as we talked about this before, you can't get buried alive. Everyone think about this just a little bit. You can't get buried alive. You can't get mummified alive. You can get sealed into a tomb while you're alive, but that doesn't mean that you're going to end up like this, which is mummification. Mummification is a very specific process that you are getting dry, your body is getting dried out in natron salt for days, and you are getting embalmed with oils, and you're getting wrapped, all of that stuff. You're not gonna get this if you get buried alive, if you get locked into a tomb. And there's no possibility of mummifying somebody alive because it also involves taking out your organs and, again, making you lay in salt for 40 days. You can't do that while you're alive. You will be struggling. You will be like, it doesn't make any sense. Yes, ribs are pretty commonly, you can see them again because the drying of the skin just constricts everything like together, and so you'll see it. He definitely was a skinny boy. Like, he definitely was a skinny lad. But yeah, it's still pretty common to see it. All the conclusions about why he is buried alive are not really that strong. So some of the things that people have concluded is that he was found with linen bound around his limbs. And then, like, he was then covered with natron and something called quicklime, which is not in an ancient Egyptian practice at all. We've actually determined that it is a Greek practice that was used to dissolve a body using quicklime, using essentially this material of quicklime. And so he was layered with just natron salt and quicklime, then with linen, and then another layer of natron salt and quicklime, and then another layer of linen. Like, he was wrapped up like a giant burrito, which is not how ancient Egyptian mummification is done at all. You are laid into a giant thing where you are dried with natron, then you are got out, they're taken out, cleaned, and then wrapped. There's not supposed to be any salt on you when you're actually in all wrapped up in the mummy. Yes. It's a good joke. That's a good joke, Addicted. I don't know if he's ever been CT scanned. That's a good question, actually. Where's that book? Let me see. Let me investigate. I have a book that has CT scans of pharaohs in it, but I don't know if he was included in that. But I don't know where the book is. I have this book. It's called Scanning the Pharaohs, CT Images of New Kingdom Royal Mummies. I also got this book signed by the author, who was creepy to me. If you don't know that story, then you don't know who I'm talking about. Let's just see. I want to see who they included in this study. Royal caches. It does include the Royal DB320 cache. But that just says the story of the Royal cache. CT examination of select mid to late 18th dynasty mummies. CT scan of Tut. CT scan of the 2 fetuses of Tutankhamun. Investigations of Tutankhamun's family. Ooh, I think he was. 175. It says pentaware, which I know is wrong, but it does say pentaware is in this. 175. Oh, I've reached the picture section in the middle. That's Marin Ptah. Oh, so here's Ramses. That is Yuyantuya. Okay, I'm skipping ahead. Oh! Why don't we read about it? Okay, I'm gonna switch it to just chatting. I will tell that story, Otto. Okay, examination of Ramses III and unknown man E. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but we studied the mummy of Ramses III using forensic, anthropological, radiological, and genetic methods. We also studied the unknown man E, possible candidate for pentaware. What year is this? I just realized, is this 2011? Is this the actual study? This is 2016. I think he was involved with the 2011 study, if I remember correctly. And this is obviously probably a publication of multiple studies kind of on top of each other, and then it's all in sort of one book. So I'm going to skip over Ramses III, but I want to see... I also forgot there was another amulet found at his neck. I forgot about that. But yeah, if you don't have this book, it's very interesting. This goes through all of his body parts and like comments on the mummification, manner, and cause of death. Yeah, it has been postulated that Ramses III died of cobra or other snake bites because of the trial transcripts. Some of the conspirators were called the Snake or Lord of the Snakes. However, we believe it is far more likely that the king died from a fatal cut wound to the throat by a sharp knife, as revealed in CT examination. Okay, unknown man E. No, it is more of a healing amulet. The wrappings were there to keep his head on, absolutely. But no, the amulet was there more as a healing thing. Okay, there is a mummy that may possibly be identified as Pentaware, the son of Ramses III, who joined his mother Ta in the plot against his father. Was found in Deir al-Bahri Cache in 1886. Has several strange features that are not on any other New Kingdom mummies. Covered with a sheepskin that still retains its white color, sheepskin was considered unclean and impure by the ancient Egyptians, as stated in the Middle Kingdom story of Senue. The hands and feet of the body were tied with leather thongs, and the face appears with the mouth open, as though screaming. The body was not mummified and thus has no embalming incision. In a 2006 re-examination of the mummy, Bob Breyer observed that the body was of a tall, stout man in his 20s who wore 2 gold earrings and a braided hairstyle, and whose toenails were trimmed and dyed with renheda. Natron had been sprinkled all over his body and resin poured into his mouth in an apparent hasty attempt at a basic mummification. The mummy and sheepskin were placed into a cedar coffin that was uninscribed and modified to fit the large body. Yeah, he's really tall, I think. Hello, Alex. Somebody asked, so we're looking at Unknown Man E, who we talked about in one of our discussions recently, but somebody asked if he had been CT scanned, and I was not sure, so I pulled out my book, Scanning the Pharaohs, and actually, I think the answer is no, because I just turned the page. Although, actually, wait, sideline, new evidence of the death of Ramses III. Oh, this talks about his toes. But yeah, it does not... There's no pictures of a CT scan. So... Yeah, so the thing is, it's rigor mortis. I'm getting to that. But, what I'm trying to think... From these words, it is apparent that Pentaware was allowed to commit suicide. He did not use any weapons, such as a knife. The only ways to end his life was to hang himself. Because of this... See, this is going off the assumption that this is him. He's estimated to be around 18 to 20 years old. Actually, I should have seen... Did they tell us how old Ramses III is? That was the one thing I forgot to grab, is how old we think he is. Okay. The morphology of the pubic symphysis indicates the age of 25 to 83 years, with an average age of above 46 years. The presence of moderate degenerative changes of the spine and joints, as well as atherosclerosis, indicate an age about 60 years. So Ramses was around 60-ish that they're giving. They give a very wide range, obviously, but they're giving him around... And he also has closure of cranial vault sutures. The age of death is over 50 years. So kind of using all of those stuff. I was going to say, is Mark going to perk up when I say pubic symphysis? I was literally like, I wanted to see if Mark is going to... Yeah, it does. Yeah, obviously that's a very wide range, but doing it off of a CT scan is hard. But they got the three things. They got cranial vault sutures, so it's over 50. You have pubic symphysis, so 25 to 83. And then you have the presence of degenerative changes of the spine, which gives you about 60. So you have to take all three of those together and give you somewhere around there. At least over 50, we can tell you. But yeah, it's hard to do. Hard to do with a CT scan and not the actual bone. I just want to check. I can't believe that he fully just accepts that this is Pentaware. It's actually kind of shocking. The identical Y chromosomal DNA and the autosomal half allele sharing of the two male mummies suggest a great possibility of a father-son relationship. Unknown Man E appears to be Pentaware, and the truth of the Harem Conspiracy has been revealed. That's the biggest bullshit sentence I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, so it does not appear that he got, at least in this study, did not get CT scanned. But he did get his DNA tested to see what if he is related. But here's why I'm going to argue to my death that this is not Pentaware, and why I think there are people kind of accepting that there's no indication that this is Pentaware. We don't know necessarily when he died. Isotopes? Oh, I don't know. That's a good question, Mark. All we can conclusively say of who this person is he is we can say, yes, he is probably a son of Ramses III. He had many sons. He had many, many, many sons. So there's this big thing that, I think one of the best conclusions of, why he has this weird mummification. Here's my thing. Why would a person who was a betrayer to the crown, a treasonous person, why would they be buried in the Valley of the Kings to then be obviously reburied into Deir al-Bahri? Why would they be reburied? Why would they be buried in a place when they don't deserve it? So, because he's the royal family? Okay. Why are they purposely burying him in a completely stupid way? I understand the putting in the sheepskin. If they think it's a ritually unclean thing, sure, you put the sheepskin in. He's ritually unclean. He's not going to the afterlife. It's fine. Why are they covering him with salt and quicklime and things that are not anything to do with it? why would they not just burn his body? Why would they not dispose of his body? Why do they have sort of this whole back and forth, kind of? It's like, I'm not that mad at him, but I am mad at him. I really like, there are explanations for all the things about him being buried alive. The binding of his body parts, his like arms, it could be, but why give him a fake name? Why give him a fake name in the text? And why give him the option to kill him? Like, they obviously gave him a little bit of a lax thing. My other thing is, we have no idea how he killed himself. No, nothing. We have no indications of how he died. He obviously didn't stab himself because we don't have anything on his body in that sense. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, generally. It just doesn't make any sense. And in my opinion, I don't think there's any indications that this mummy got actually executed. I really don't think there's any indications, because I think everybody is essentially judging him for looking like he's in a pained expression, when there are plenty of mummies, both Egyptian and non-Egyptian, as Otto pointed out, that have this expression, that this is just rigor mortis. This is rigor mortis around the jaw that constrains. I think he looks pained, but I know that that is just like, sorry, I'm all congested now because I've talked too much. This is just what a mummy looks like, in my opinion. And so I think that they are jumping to conclusions that they don't have. And all we know about this mummy, truly, is that he's the son of Ramses III. We don't know anything else. He was in a completely uninscribed coffin. He has no name associated with him. We have nothing. Yeah, Josie. Yeah, a lot of them would become priesthood. A lot of them would join the priesthood. A lot of the half brothers of Khufu, of the Great Pyramid builder, we know of a lot of them. So Rahotep is one of his half brothers. Hemiunu is one of his half brothers. Hemiunu was the architect of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Rahotep was a vizier. So a lot of them would get high positions in the royal court. Absolutely. Oh God, I'm so congested. Don't look at me. Oh God. There's like nothing even coming out. It's so stupid. Jesus Christ. Just like nothing's coming out. I'm sorry. I thought that would be quiet. I'm turning around. I apologize. So yeah, so we know that several apologies. We know that several sons of Ramses III die before him. We have 2 tombs that are highly decorated as 4 sons of Ramses III. We know of other ones that are named. Yes, it's odd that he doesn't have a named coffin. Yes, it's odd that he didn't seem to have a big tomb or a burial. But apologies for my deviated septum. There is one interesting possibility that obviously that you can kind of explain away. And I know it's not great, but you can sort of explain it. His contorted face, the linen bounds that were on his arms indicate that rigor mortis may have already set in. And there is the possibility that maybe he lived abroad. The biggest possibility when it comes to all of the weird mummification practices is that he lived abroad. He was an official who lived abroad, who did not live within close enough means to a good mummification house. And let's say he is a son of Ramses III. He's working as an official or in a governor or in a military position in the Near East. And he dies suddenly in some sort of way. Rigor mortis has already got to set in, which I'm sure Mark knows. Maybe, I don't know if you know, this is more forensic anthropology. But in certain time constraints for rigor mortis, especially in a hot country, it comes on quite fast. And so maybe they found him too late, and they have to put all of these linen bounds to sort of keep his arms in the right position. And then essentially he gets a local embalming and burial, but they were very inexperienced mummification priests. Probably not even actual mummification priests. Probably just other priests. And so they use this combination of natron salt and quicklime. Again, is a Greek practice for decomposing body fat and decomposing bodies. And that also, the use of those two together also makes the muscles contract, because they also didn't take out any of the organs. They left all the organs in. They didn't even attempt to take it out. So that explains the contorted muscles. And then you have the local embalmers wrapping him in a sheepskin, which was a common burial practice in the Near East. Even though the Egyptians believed it was unclean, it was common in the Near East to be buried with a sheepskin. So then it appears that he was placed in a coffin, maybe in a coffin that was in the middle of getting made, or a cedar coffin that was getting ready to be sent to Egypt to be used for somebody else. But they don't have anyone who can read hieroglyphs. They don't have anyone who can decorate it. So they just put him in it and they send him on their way. It's a very good question, Mothman. I am not sure. I would assume that some cultures had to know about it, maybe during certain time periods. We don't know it this auto, but this is one explanation for what happened to him, because the mummification that he was given is very distinctly not Egyptian. And so it's either that he had the worst mummification priest who is in training, or he was somewhere else. And he was somewhere else where maybe there were some Egyptians living, like in a military fort, where they would typically not have a temple or a mummification priest. And that, no. So the other thing, Prime Operative, is that unfortunately he was found in a cache burial, where essentially he was reburied. So he may have had a tomb with items, but we don't know. He may have been put in a side chamber of Ramses III's tomb. We don't know. No, I feel like they know about mummification, but they would not be trained to do it, because technically mummification priests are a priest. They are trained very specifically for it. What's likely it was prepared by his buddies? Who knows? It was obviously prepared by somebody who has no idea. Even if, so that's the other possibility, is that, yeah, maybe he was prepared in Egypt and he died in a place where there were no mummification priests and there was no point of trying to get him to a mummification priest. Who knows? Maybe they went out, I don't know, they're at an oasis, or they're traveling in between somewhere and they're in the middle of the desert. Possible. But also, they still got natron salt, and natron salt's not something you would typically take with you all the time. Very much so, Gavin. Hi, Gavin. Welcome on in. It depends, but things like vizier, architects, scribes, priests, all common. Very, very top tier jobs. Other princes would have. It appears to be his natural hair, at least, and it's braided. I don't know if it's any sort of distinctive type. Within an hour in temps above 25 Celsius. Yeah, exactly. So that is a really big deal, is that, yeah, maybe he couldn't have, they did not have access to a mummification priest within 36 hours. And so this is what they did. I also don't even know what the presence of quicklime is in Egypt, because it's a very weird product that I didn't think about and did not do any research to see if there's even any evidence that they even existed in Egypt. It doesn't seem it was used in mummification. It was used in Greek traditions. So, yes. Apparently the Greeks used it to literally decompose a body. Like they would cover them in them. But I also am not as super familiar with Greek. I was about to say Greek mummification, not Greek mummification. Greek, by burning oyster shells. Here's my question. Did the ancient Egyptians have oysters? They actually poured resin in his mouth. So not one last beer, but a whole bunch of resin went in his mouth. So yeah. So while there's like lots and lots of speculation, the act of being buried alive does not match up. And so there are also other explanations for this peculiarities of the mummies that don't indicate that he is Pentuer. Because they're essentially just relying on their knowledge that he is a criminal. That is all they're going off of to jump that to say he is Pentuer. He's never, in my knowledge, been identified with any other son of Ramses, which is ridiculous because he has several that are named and preserved, and it doesn't seem like anyone's even bothered to say, oh, well, it could be him. It doesn't seem like they do that. They just jump that gun and say, oh, no, he's a criminal. He was buried alive. Pentuer. And even this book, I was very surprised. It's a 2016 book, and it still says it. So even though this conspirator was the son of a pharaoh, there's no indication that he would be given a decent burial. And obviously he was given the option to commit suicide, which might have been kinder than execution. It does not mean that he would be buried in the Valley of the Kings. No, the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, or the Valley of the Nobles as a traitor. There's no indication that he would still be buried. Yeah, it's just like, there's just nothing really. It's honestly a little bit of a fantasy of people just kind of jumping that, and I don't like it. Conclusion. I really wanted to read this book, but it was not going to get here in time. But there is a book called The Harem Conspiracy by Susan Redford that probably contains a lot of this information. It's a little old, but it's probably not too old. Although it might be older than the 2011 CT scans. I'm not sure. I gotta look that up later. So this is obviously a huge event in the 20th dynasty. We're extremely lucky to have this very semi-detailed event, or account of the events that take place. There are, again, as you guys have asked, have there been any other assassinations? There are several assassinations that are thought to may have occurred, but this is the only one that we have substantial evidence for. What I want you to take away from this event is that there is a much more full story because of the other smaller papyri that we talked about. I think really when people talk about the Harem Conspiracy, they only talk about the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, which genuinely, when I was starting this lecture, I was only going to talk about that one. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to talk about the other four, because they also give lots of great detail about the actual event. Mainly Papyrus Lee and Papyrus Roland give lots of extra evidence of like what they are specifically doing in this assassination coup. I hope y'all learned some fun things. There are some interesting articles. Let me know if you guys want to see any of them. A lot of them are free. I got online. And then there's also this book again, which I didn't have a chance to actually read, but I'm sure it contains a lot of the similar stuff. Thank you. And good night. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm very excited. Season 4 of Beyond Denial lecture series completed. Or first lecture of season 4. But yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.